It is 4 o'clock. Please stand to sing O Canada. We'll start with the roll call. Vicki, please, our clerk.
Mayor Sue Patterson,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Warren Dickert,
Present.
Councillor Harold Fleet,
Present.
Councillor Dave Hawking,
Present.
Councillor Carol Hudson, present, Councillor Brandon Cable,
Present.
and Councillor Susan Sackle.
Present. Thank you. All members are accounted for. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement. As we work toward reconciliation with Indigenous people, we begin our meeting today by respectfully acknowledging that we are situated on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, the people of Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. So welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, March the 20th, 2023. Good afternoon, council, staff, guests, the viewing public, and the media. Council, does anyone have a disclosure of pecuniary interest or a conflict of interest? I don't see any, and of course, if one should arise during the meeting, you may declare it then. Item 5 is agenda additions or deletions, and we do not have any. Item 6 is delegations. We have 2 this evening. Our first delegation is Sarah Pelton, the coordinator for the Grey Bruce Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Welcome, Sarah.
Vicki, do you need me to pull it up? Okay, thank you. Great, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about community safety and wellbeing planning in Bruce and Grey. The overall goal of community safety and wellbeing planning is to create sustainable communities where everyone is safe, has a sense of belonging, and opportunities to participate. So where everyone can meet their needs for healthcare, education, food, housing, income, social, and cultural expression. The eventual impact of this is a reduction in crime. So what does this mean, and how are we working towards it? Next slide, please. This approach means focusing on protecting against risk factors that make people vulnerable to crime and victimization. We're working collaboratively and cooperatively to identify duplication or gaps in service delivery, and we're leveraging strong working relationships between agencies and across sectors. We're using data to track the collective impact of our work and inform decisions. And finally, one of the ultimate goals is to decrease the need for acute incident responses, things like emergency department visits and police services calls, which are reactive and costly. Next slide, please. This is the provincial framework for community safety and wellbeing planning. The acute incident responses, those reactive emergency responses, are the bullseye in the middle. Our goal is to focus on strategies in the outer 3 rings of risk intervention, prevention, and social development. So what does this look like? Ultimately, it means that everyone is aware of services and how to access them for themselves and the clients they support. And where gaps have been identified, we're working together to address systemic issues through advocacy, investment, and long-term planning. We're focusing on addressing risks before the crisis occurs. Next slide, please. So a visual representation of prevention might look like this. If people are falling into a river, there is, of course, value and necessity to throwing in life preservers, sending ambulances, building hospitals. It might even be prudent to build rafts or build the hospitals closer to the river so we can get to people faster. But these are all reactive strategies. Pulling people to safety does not address the conditions that made people vulnerable in the first place. So how do we determine who's at greatest risk? Can we identify some of these factors so that we can prevent people from falling in the first place? Can we most effectively address problems that put people at greatest risk? Next slide, please. This is our governance model for the plan. Over 70 partners participated in this process and continue to serve on the advisory committee, including Bruce and Grey counties, member municipalities like Hanover, police services, police service boards, representatives from health, education, community service, and other agencies across both counties. And in upcoming slides, I'll speak to some of the specific pieces in this model. Next slide, please. So how did this start? Under the Community Safety and Policing Act, community safety and wellbeing plans were legislated for all municipalities in Ontario. The Ministry of the Solicitor General has identified some of the benefits as an increased understanding of risks, enhanced communication and collaboration, increased coordination and access to service, and that reduced reliance on incident response. Next slide, please. For your reference, I've included links to the plan, which includes community survey results, data gathering, identification of our areas of priority, and a broader discussion of the process and the background around the planning. I've also included the indicator report, which is the data framework, and this includes key indicators from places like public health, emergency department and police services data, 211 call trends, income and employment data, among others. Next slide, please. When issues are referred to community safety and wellbeing planning, we are creating a framework to address them by referring this issue to the appropriate agency or community organization or action table to leverage existing work that's already happening by bringing groups together to collaborate. We're addressing gaps and needs through support and advocacy work, such as a letter of support or lobbying for funding, initiative, funding application, or exploring opportunities for future research. Next slide, please. Where possible, the action table is aligning with our 5 areas of priority, our existing organizations or collaborations. The Community Drug and Alcohol Strategy is the action table for addictions and substance use. The Bruce Grey Poverty Task Force is the action table for poverty and income. The Homelessness Response Table is the action table for housing and homelessness. Our mental health action table is still in development, and the crime prevention action table was just started, bringing together community agencies, police services, and members of the public. Next slide, please. We're also creating an organizational assessment tool, which will help organizations and municipalities identify and promote protective factors that will help mitigate risks. So this could be things like a policy for offering subsidized recreation programming for low-income families, an investment in physician recruitment programs to ensure that everyone has access to primary health care, which we know is a preventative factor. And through a community safety and wellbeing lens, we're also looking at things like whose input is considered when decisions are made. How is community outreach undertaken? This tool will help ensure that these questions about protective and risk factors are part of the decision-making process. Next slide, please. A situation table is a risk intervention model that was restarted in Grey and Bruce in mid-2021 under the purview of community safety and wellbeing. We have representatives from over 20 agencies that meet weekly to present a high-risk situation, determine appropriate supports needed for an intervention, and respond within 48 hours. This process does not take the place of ongoing case management, but it's designed to provide immediate support and avert a crisis. Next slide, please. We had 27 situations presented in 2022. We've had 5 so far at the table in 2023. The expertise of those at the table is used to determine if a situation meets the criteria for acutely elevated risk. So this means that chronic conditions have accumulated to a point of crisis, or new circumstances have increased the risk of harm or victimization. And one agency does not have the resources alone to mitigate the risk. Determining acutely elevated risk is a judgment call. The group votes to determine if the situation meets that criteria, and agencies work together to determine how to respond. This model depends on trust, collaboration, and strong working relationships between all agencies. Next slide, please. The data from the situation table helps us to identify risk factors that make people vulnerable to crisis, as well as agencies that are most frequently offering assistance and services that are mobilized. We may eventually be able to compare our data across Ontario with other similarly sized communities, for example, which might help us understand unique approaches to risk mitigation in rural communities. The top 3 services mobilized in 2022 situations were related to housing, addictions, and mental health supports. Data from other situation tables and research on this approach suggests that the long-term benefits, again, are that decrease in emergency department visits and police service responses, and an increase in collaboration among agencies. So this is one strategy where we're bringing together resources and generating solutions to help avoid potential crises. Next slide, please. In the last year, we've focused on branding, building a new website, and creating social media templates and a short summary of our goals and activities. With these tools, we will continue to work towards educating the community about the relationship between an investment in upstream prevention and a decrease in crime and victimization. Next slide, please. The key to successful community safety and well-being is working together. We're using the experience and expertise of different sectors to target root causes of complex issues. We're collaborating to ensure that everyone has access to the resources they need to thrive when they need them. We want to mitigate risk and address needs before they require those reactive, expensive responses, and continue to build strong communities where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Council, comments, questions? Deputy Mayor Dickert.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Sarah. I've had the opportunity to listen to this presentation twice, and I want to say that I think it's great that we've done this as a region, because these issues that we're dealing with certainly don't have any municipal boundaries around them, and everything goes from one municipality to the other. So I think it's great that the community safety well-being plan is being worked on. I know it's actually still pretty young. It's a couple of years, but it is still got a long ways to go. And I think that the work you're doing is, I'd like to see us, I see us raising the profile of this work. And I think the fact you're coming out and sharing these presentations with is very important. The last presentation, you did mention physician recruitment as one of the things. Can you give us any insight as to what this plan might do in that regard?
Yeah, that's a good question. So thank you. So we are not actively doing anything related to physician recruitment right now. We have been approached by a couple of people who are involved in that space for different municipalities. And I think one thing we could look at is whether there are kind of collaborative strategies for that recruitment piece, even though we know that unfortunately with physician recruitment, all the communities are in some cases sort of competing against each other, right? But are there ways in which we can make rural communities, an appealing destination and try to bring people in collaboratively? Because what we don't want is for every municipality to be working in silo towards similar goals, right? So if we are able to bring certain things under the purview of community safety and wellbeing planning, we can collaborate and organize perhaps a little more effectively. So that's something we could work on.
Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Sarah, for your presentation. Page 27, star top risk categories. Criminal involvement is the highest at 15%. A lot of the criminal involvement, are they not caused from like the mental health at 12%, alcohol at 10%, and drugs at 6%?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So for each of those risk categories, there are a number of sort of sub risks within each category. So 15% is 15% overall of all the risks that were identified, and up to 15 can be identified for every situation that's brought to the situation table. So the criminal involvement could be anything. It also includes victimization. So criminal involvement doesn't have to be someone who has a criminal charge against them. It could be someone who's involved in something as a victim as well. And there is, as you pointed out, a high correlation between criminality and victimization and mental health. I think we've seen almost all of the situations have risk factors for both.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Councillor Hawking.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for your presentation, Sarah. I was taken back by your governance structure slide. It's truly amazing that you've got all of these different partners working together. I bet someday you feel it's like herding cattle, but it is really, you should be commended for your ability to pull all of these people together. And thanks for your good work and good luck in your efforts. But that was a really good slide to demonstrate the governance of this very, very important committee.
Well, thank you very much. I think it really speaks to the commitment that all of the communities have, not just the municipalities, but all of our social services and other agencies working across Bruce and Grey, and the importance of addressing these issues collectively, because we know when we're looking at things like crime prevention, access to mental health, access to housing, these are not siloed concerns. So I think it really speaks to the commitment of the partners and certainly also this municipality. And we're happy to have your input, and I'm happy to be here sharing it with you. So thank you.
Other comments? Councillor Sacco.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I too, Sarah, am thrilled to have you here. And I introduced myself to Sarah because this is one of the committees that I'm sitting on. So I've done a lot of reading and I'm so impressed with everything that the group is doing. And I noticed in your package, you are seeking volunteers. Is there anything we can do to help you? And what kind of volunteers perhaps are you looking for, Sarah?
Well, so specifically, that slide is around the crime prevention action table, which we've just started. So that group met once in February, and we have our next meeting next week. So we have a number of community volunteers who have come from different places. We have people representing education, representing healthcare, long-term care, and a number of police services representatives. So we are certainly open to expanding that as we start to look at our priorities. Education is going to be key to that. So part of this project and this plan is helping our communities understand that we need to be investing and looking at prevention as a way of trying to alleviate some of these more acute concerns that we see in the communities. So we would welcome broadly representation for that committee. And as we have other opportunities come up, I'll certainly share them with the advisory committee and in other capacities so you can spread them throughout the community. So thank you for asking.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. I have one. Sorry. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Sarah, for the presentation. I'm wondering if you can tell me on, let's see, we have page 23, the risk factors and protective factors. You have a lot of different things listed with the exclusion of the last few, talking about neighborhood, peers, and that sort of thing. Are those projects that you're still working on to have the protective factors in place?
Thank you for the question. So the protective factors and risk factors are modeled, or most of them come out of social determinants of health. And this is set up provincially in the community safety and well-being framework. So we haven't taken each factor as something we're addressing separately. When we look at protective and risk factors, we're looking primarily at how they intersect. So for example, I was speaking to Susan earlier, and I think also Sue, about Launchpad, and what a great example this is of trying to provide protective factors for youth. So for example, one protective factor that's within that subset is access to adults who provide mentorship and positive relationships. Also positive access to peers and safe neighborhoods and stability after school, and all of those things relate together so that we can try to provide protection around youth, for example, so that they have somewhere to go and a place where they feel like they belong. So each protective factor on its own is not being addressed in isolation. We're looking at how they work together to help protect people and vulnerable community members against those risks. Does that make sense?
So a lot of the protective factors could be utilized for each one of those things together.
That's right, exactly. Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, so my question, for instance, if this council felt that we were going to be in a crisis or were in one, in a situation, how do we contact you?
You can phone me or contact me by email. Certainly if there's an actual crisis, call 911 for those emergency resources or 211 for access to community resources. But certainly if you have an idea or an identified concern or something that you think we should be working on through this plan, please give me a call or send me an email and we can talk about it. And the first step would be determining who else is maybe working in that space and how we can draw upon those resources. But please feel free to reach out anytime. I'd be happy to have that conversation.
Very good, thank you. Okay, great presentation. Glad you were here. Thank you. Okay. All right, our second delegation, item 6.2 is we have Hugh Simpson here. He is past president of the Grey County Federation of Agriculture. Hello, Hugh, welcome. So you need to press the button that looks like a person and has a white border around it.
That looks like the button. Mayor Patterson and council, thanks very much for the invitation. My name is Hugh Simpson. I'm a commercial beekeeper and a commercial maple syrup producer over in the Singhampton and Feversham area. As Mayor Patterson mentioned, I'm on the board at Grey County Federation of Agriculture. That's about 10 or 12 years or so I've been on that board and past president. I was on the board of the provincial Ontario Federation of Agriculture for 3 or 4 years. And my job today is, I'm not bringing anything controversial or provocative. We like to make sure that we stay in touch every couple of years by making these kinds of presentations with the policymakers and the policy influencers, which would certainly include you. And my objective today really is to just bring you sort of an update about what we're up to, our areas of focus and priority, and to make sure that the portals for communication are open. So I'll begin. And some of this will be familiar to some, and for others it may be new, and I'm available after and for any questions that there might be. The Grey County Federation of Agriculture has been enabled since 1940. We are the regional or the county affiliate of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. We have a membership of about 16, almost 1,700 farmers in Grey County. The broad nature of our work is to represent as best we can kind of the common voice and concerns of farmers, farm families, and agriculture in Grey County. We do that through an organization of about 10 or 11 directors. We meet on a monthly basis. These are organized meetings with agendas, and we invite anyone really, certainly from the ag community, but anyone, you are all invited to attend any of those meetings. We can do that virtually, and we can do it certainly in person. We do a lot of work around public engagement, and I'm going to speak a little bit to some of those social events in a couple of minutes. Let me just, on the economic contribution slide, this is information that we've gathered up from OMAFRA and StatsCan, and there's some terrific information available that will be somewhere in your inbox there will be a colorful visual that talks about the impact of agriculture in Grey County. It's really quite a remarkable visual, but I'm just going to highlight a few of the things here for you tonight, this afternoon. Over 8,000 people are employed in our area in the agri-food sector. There are over 2,200 agri-food businesses in the Grey County area. The farm receipts are upwards of $550 million annually. Of course, those are farm receipts that find their way back into the community in some way, either by way of spending or investment. And so it's an important part economically. I think we all recognize that of our county. There's over 2,000 farms. The total farmland area in Grey County is almost 500,000 acres. That represents just a little more than 40% of the total acreage of Grey County. So we as farmers have a responsibility that we take seriously in terms of stewardship of that much land in our area. The average farm here is on the small size when compared to other areas, especially in the south and southwest of our area, at 206 acres per farm. That's a small farm these days. Lots of those farms are consolidated under somebody who rents those farms, and you'll hear lots of farmers who are farming 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 acres. Some of those 206 acre farms are included in those numbers. But if you get down towards London and Chatham and so on, it's not uncommon to see one farmer with 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 acres under his or her stewardship. In our area, the largest farm commodity is cattle farming. That likely won't be much of a surprise. Grains and oil seeds come second. And then dairy is a big part of the farm sector in our area. I'm a honey producer, so I like to say that almost 15% of the Ontario honey comes from Grey County. Some people may be surprised about that. In the provincial on the provincial board, their priorities are the priorities that we also support. They include farmland preservation, the impact of climate change, both on farmers and the impact that farmers can have on climate change. Mental health and awareness has really sort of climbed the priority list in the last 3 or 4 years. I'll talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing there. Broadband internet and natural gas are not new things. Those have been on the agenda for a long time, probably too long. There's some good work going on in those areas and still more work to do. And so we support all of those things which are high level, high priority items for the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, who as of tomorrow, they have what is called their Queen's Park Day. They are now, that board, the provincial board is now down in Toronto, meeting on these priorities with the provincial government and opposition parties and so on. As it regards farmland preservation, probably the #1 item is Bill 23. That won't be new around the room here. That is a high priority area of interest for the provincial board as well as our Grey County board. In the Grey County area, we have 3 priorities underneath those that we support from the provincial area, and that is engagement of our membership. You might have the same, but it's sometimes hard to get formal engagement of our stakeholders. And so we do all we can, both formally and informally, to try and get farmers to the table to talk to us about what's on their mind. And there's a bunch of things that we do in that area. Social events. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn if I tell you that there's going to be a fairly major Grey County event featuring a fellow named Gord Bamford, who is a rather high profile country music person who's going to come, and there'll be some profile not too far from here on that area that you'll hear some more about. We do a lot of work with youth and farming. We send kids down to the 4-H and or 4-H and junior farmers down to the Royal Ontario Winter Fair. We pay for some rooms and we get them some lunch and we make sure that the bus gets them there and back and so on to represent Grey County and kind of raise the profile of farming and our community with youth. Healthy farms and environment. A good deal of work is done by us with in an advisory capacity with the conservation authorities and any townships or any municipalities that have or counties that have an advisory committee channel. We like to make sure we're involved in that to make sure that the voice of the farmer is considered when thinking about how do we do things in a healthy way for that includes farming. One of the things I wanted to bring to your attention as it regards the activities that we're sponsoring, and I think that you might know about, is coming up this weekend is what we call our politicians meeting. We can probably have a better name for it, but that's what we've been using for the last 20 years or so. It's well attended. This year, there will be a great deal of focus on the subject of Bill 23. We'll have expertise, provincial expertise, both from the OFA and outside the OFA, third parties, to come in and talk a little bit about what that means in Grey County and what it means specifically to farming. We'll have good opportunity for engagement. I think you will all have heard about that and we'll have had an invitation to that, and I hope that you'll give it some consideration to attend. I think that's all I'll say, except that, as I said at the outset, my purpose today was to give you kind of a brief overview of what we're thinking about, what we're doing, what are our priorities, and to make sure that the channels for communication are open. And some of those some of that contact information is included on that last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Council, any comments or questions? Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Hugh, for your presentation. The average farm size is 206 acres. Are the smaller operators being taken over by the bigger operators? Are there less farm?
We are losing farmland, generally speaking, and I think that answer's a little different than what your question was. The answer to your question is yes. There is consolidation of farms. It is more economically practical to run 2,000 acres than it is to run 200 acres. The reason I included in my answer that subject about losing farm acres is because it'll come up again in our conversations this Saturday on Bill 23. But we are losing in Ontario, we're losing about 319 acres per day. Grey County is a part of that. We are not growing our farm community, we are shrinking our farm community. That has a lot to do with immigration from the city and the position from some that they'd rather not farm it, they'd rather create sort of an estate lot and maybe plant some trees and so on. But there is some reduction in Grey County as well.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation, Hugh. We typically don't look at Hanover as having a lot of farmland or anything like that, but we actually are, I guess, quite agriculturally involved when you look at Exceldor and P&H Mills and Maple Leaf. You know, they do play agriculture plays a big role in our community. And you touched on the 319 acres a day that we lose. We have in town here, we're basically out of land as well. We're kind of like the farmers, we're running out of places to go. I look at the opportunity that we have as being a good news story for the agricultural industry, because we do a fairly high intensification. When we're developing land, we put a lot more homes in some of those rural estates you mentioned there. I know I went for a drive just last Friday through one of the rural areas not too far from here. And it was kind of surprising to see how many homes are being built out on those 1 acre, 2 acre lots, taking up a fair bit of that. So I guess, you know, I think it's important that the Federation comes and shares your concerns with us, but I think at the same time, I hope we can count on the Federation to support our efforts going forward, because we do need this land, and we're actually very good stewards of the land, because we do use high intensity for our development. So I do hope that that is kept in mind as we go forward. So more of a statement than a question. Thank you.
Thank you for the statement. And we do support intensification. We talk about, and you'll see this if you have an opportunity to come on the 25th. And even if not, we'll make sure that the sort of our policy statements get to you. But our general statement is intensification is kind of the policy direction that we're advocating for. We recognize and we're supportive of the idea that of growing the population and making more housing available to the growing population. It's about how to do it and doing that in such a way that it preserves good farmland.
Other comments or questions? So I want to follow up on Deputy Mayor's comment. We do support agriculture here in Hanover, even though we are recognized as a regional urban center. And we have less than 10 square kilometers within our boundaries, but we do have a couple, maybe 3 farms on the northern part of our limit. We also have a chicken farm, a trout farm. And on the agribusiness side, we have P&H Milling, Maple Leaf Foods, XL Door, and we support Hanover Raceway and the Hanover Fair, highlighting how important agriculture is. So it's good we can work in partnership.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. We look forward to working with you, and we've enjoyed working with you.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Item 7 is business arising from the minutes. This will be covered under item 8. So item 8 is council and committee of the whole minutes. 8.1 is the regular council meeting minutes from February 21st. I need a mover and seconder to put that on the floor. I have Councillor Sackle and Councillor Hudson. You'll remember at that meeting, we approved extending the ice in the P&H Center for this season. We also appointed Councillor Fleet as the alternate member to Grey County Council. And a couple others, we passed the bylaw for discharge of firearms, and we received the fire department annual report and the annual health and safety report. Are there any comments or questions with those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Item 8.2 is the committee of the whole meeting minutes from March the 6th. I need a mover and seconder to put those on the floor. Councillor Cable and Councillor Fleet. And that evening, we received the Community Improvement Plan report designating authority to the Economic Development Manager as the Community Improvement Plan Administrator, with support from other staff and representatives from the Economic, Tourism, and Cultural Development Advisory Committee. We also received an information report on development charges from Andrew, our Building Services Manager and CBO. Any comments or questions? All in favor of those minutes? That's carried. Thank you. Item 9 is staff reports. The first one, 9.1, is report PB 0923. The subject is the Giorgio subdivision draft plan extension. It's from Andrew Wilkin, Manager of Building Services and CBO, and I'll take a mover and seconder for that. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Hawking. Andrew?
Thank you, Your Worship. PB 9-23. As some of you may recall, on February the 7th, 2022, Council approved report PB 4-22 and supported a 1-year extension for the Giorgio Lucia subdivision draft plan. Subsequent to that meeting, a letter of support from the town was provided to Grey County, and the extension was granted to May the 15th of 2023. On March the 16th of this year, we received a letter from Ron Davidson Land Use Planning requesting, on behalf of the owner, a letter of support from the town of Hanover seeking a further 1-year extension on their draft plan of subdivision. In accordance with section 913.1 of the official plan, a letter of support from the clerk of the local municipality or secretary treasurer is required. In accordance with correspondence from Ron Davidson Land Use Planning Inc., Lucia Giorgio is requesting council support on said extension. Mr. Davidson provides throughout his letter some justification for the extension as to what items have been completed to date and some reasoning as to why other items may not have been completed within the May 15th extension timeline. If council supports the extension, Grey County Planning and Development staff would present a report to County Committee of the Whole for their approval, along with the extension of draft plan approval for a period of 1 additional year. There are no financial implications to this report, and the recommendation is that report PB 9-23, Giorgio subdivision file 42T 2016-2000 or -08 draft plan extension be received, and that council agree to a 1-year extension of the draft approval extension of plan of subdivision as requested by Ron Davidson Land Use Planning representing Lucia Giorgio. And I will answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Andrew. Any comments or questions? Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. Andrew, just for interest's sake, what would happen if the extension was not granted?
Then the time period would lapse and essentially they would start back at square one with a new draft plan approval.
And do you have any expected time frame from them at this point as to when they'll commence work on the subdivision?
Through your worship, actual work on the subdivision, I do not have a timeline on when that potentially would be happening. Obviously, you know, over half of their conditions have been met, so they're working towards it. I would say sometimes developer can be a little coy of how much information they give at this time as they kind of work through the conditions. So no actual dates.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, any other, Deputy Mayor Dickert?
Thank you, Your Worship. Andrew, when we have a draft plan of subdivision, does that tie up wastewater and water capacity on the part of the town? And by extending these, do you see it holding back any other developments that may be pending?
Through your worship. Yes, it does tie up potential services that are in the area. In this instance, it's not tying up any future or any imminent plans. But really that's the crux of why there is a timeline on these draft plans or extensions, so that there's something in place to keep these moving forward and an option, you know, for the town to potentially pursue or move forward something else as time may go on.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. All in favor of PB 0923. And that is carried. Thank you. Item 9.2 is report ED 0223. The subject is Launchpad organization and operational status. It's from April Marshall, our economic development manager. I need a mover and seconder to put this on the floor. Councillor Hudson and Councillor Sacco. April, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm writing this report to council on behalf of the Board of Directors for Launchpad, which is a not-for-profit organization that we're aware of in our community that was developed in 2015 with support of the town of Hanover. Again, it is a separate not-for-profit organization ran by a board of directors. However, Hanover contributes annually to the operations of the facility and has heavy investment in the operations as per the report. So I do want to start by highlighting all of the positive impacts that Launchpad has had. We heard it referenced this evening. We hear a lot of stories about the opportunity for youth to enhance their skill development, discover their passions. It provides that safe space. It creates training opportunities for our future workforce. It's received tons of accolades across the province. And there are a list of positive impacts that Launchpad has had. And unfortunately, I think some of the finances are overshadowing all the positives. We have a lot of questions in our community about the funding that's going to the facility and what is happening there. So I wanted to take this opportunity to bring it forward for council and have a wholesome discussion on our place with the organization and our role in supporting it to be successful. So furthering that as well, as far as Hanover's broader strategic priorities, and through our retention and attractions campaign, we have developed our HIP Apprentice campaign, which is to leverage what's happening at Launchpad and further grow that skill development to support our workforce. So we were fortunate this year to receive funding to hire a project coordinator to help facilitate that process. And she's just getting in there right now and has a lot of good things on the go. So there's a lot of opportunity there. It's just, I feel it's at a point right now where Launchpad just really needs to take a step back and really evaluate the business model and make plans for that sustainable future. So with that, I wanted to share with you the, again, just going back to the total investment made. So from 2015, we're seeing, that $100,000 annual contribution. And there has been reoccurring deficit that the town of Hanover has also covered. So, our investment in total is approaching $1 million for this facility. And I think we're at an opportunity now for us to really help steer the direction of Launchpad and bring everybody together for a positive future and making it a sustainable business model. So through the board discussions, and Councillor Sackle can contribute to this conversation as well. We've had a lot of deliberations with the board of directors. I really hand it to them for the commitment they've made to Launchpad and working with the town and the staff at Launchpad to get us all working together towards the same goals. So at a recent meeting on March the 7th, we were discussing some opportunities, because if you look in your financial implications, you will see that we've reflected the deficit that has been incurred by Launchpad in 2022. So we've really been talking to the Launchpad board about this deficit and what the town how the town carries it, and what does that mean, and needing their commitment in repaying that deficit. So what we've done is we've structured a repayment model, essentially granting them a loan for the deficit and then creating a business plan for that repayment. So again, going back to the deliberations with the board, we just recognize, just given the current staffing complement and the need to reorganize roles and responsibilities, what the center offers, looking at the financial revenues and expenses. The Launchpad board has made some difficult decisions to pause some of the programming while this is evaluated, but also to come to the town of Hanover seeking support. And that support being listed in your option number 1. So with this, there's 4 components, and those components are that in the absence of an existing board treasurer, the Launchpad board of directors propose that the town of Hanover assume control of all expenditures, including company credit card, to act as treasurer until the time at which the role may be assumed by a member of the board. So that is our role in just ensuring that we're managing the expenses for the facility, for the organization. It's for the they're asking that the economic development manager and director of corporate services and treasurer really take a deep dive into the budget and have it come to a balanced state. Again, to ensure that we don't incur further deficit this year, and that we're at that break-even point while we take the time to reorganize and do our business planning. Having more town representation on the board of directors. Currently, the town staff position, which is the economic development manager, I'm not in a voting position at this time. The council rep is. So what we're proposing is that we increase the number of council representatives to 2, both with voting privileges, and allow the staff to have a voting privilege as well, so that we have 3 voting privileges on the board. And that that Launchpad requests a loan from the town of Hanover to cover the current outstanding deficit, and propose the repayment term to begin in 2024 over a 3-year term. So again, just allowing that extra time in 2023 to reorganize, do our planning, and start that repayment schedule in 2024. So with that, I guess we're not really looking at what our contribution is. Council has agreed to that contribution through our annual budgeting process. But there is the increase on town resources, which is being requested at this time. Again, I'm just going to go back to, we just need this time to reorganize, get all on the same page, and have a sustainable business model moving forward, so that we can continue to do all the great things that Launchpad can do, and tie it further into our broader strategic goals in what the town of Hanover is trying to accomplish, as well as looking to it is meant to be a regional center. That was the intent of it. So going back again to our regional neighbors, and talking about the benefits of the center, and getting more participation on a broader scale. So I guess it's protecting our investment, it's enhancing our investment, and it's putting some accountability to the dollars that we contribute to that center. So with that, I will open it up for discussion, but the recommendation is that report ED 0223 Launchpad organization and operational status be received, and that council advise staff with the recommendation on the financial and in-kind involvement of the town of Hanover in the organization of Launchpad as they restructure the operations and prioritize formalizing plans for a sustainable future. I should also mention that we saw another not-for-profit in Grey County up against the same issues, and we saw Grey County lend support to develop a business plan. So we also requested that support from Grey County, which they have agreed to do. That is also noted in your financial implications section. So with that, Launchpad board is very excited about that opportunity for Grey County to help facilitate that process. And they would like to also financially contribute to that. And I'm suggesting as well that the town of Hanover consider contributing to that business planning as well. So again, that we can help facilitate and ensure that that more hours are put into a more fulsome plan that will be achievable, and that again we can tie it into our broader strategic goals. So those are the options that are before you. And again, I would just open up for questions or discussion through you, your worship.
Thank you, April. Councillor Sacco.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, April, for your very detailed report. I would like to say a few words as the Hanover Council representative on the Launchpad Board of Directors. Yes, I thank the town of Hanover for the commitment and the support that you've given Launchpad over the years. And I've sat in on numerous meetings with April since I have joined the committee and the Board of Directors. And there's no doubt in my mind that council should support option number 1. I want to start, fellow councillors, to take you back to September the 26th of last year. That was Meet the Candidates Night. And you remember we had 10 questions that were posed. And one of them was, what do you think of Launchpad? And you might remember that this came up at one of the Board of Directors meetings. That's where I got this idea, but I thought it was an important question. And if I remember correctly, we all very much supported what Launchpad is doing. And we know that they have received accolades. It's wonderful to have Launchpad Youth and Technology Center in Hanover. And there are other small towns who would love to have Launchpad in their community, I'm sure. So we all supported it then, and I'm hoping that tonight you will support it again. And for all the reasons that April has already given, I don't need to repeat them. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Councillor Hawking.
Thank you, Worship. April, I went through the financial and I forgot to mention this to you as a question, but I'm going to ask it now. What did they do right in 2020 to have a surplus of 106,000?
Through your worship. Well, as 2020 was the year for COVID, there was a lot of funding being extended without strings attached. So they were able to benefit from that. This is my understanding.
Thank you, Worship. That's what I assume. Thank you for confirming that. I want to state that I was on the stage, and when I said, yes, I support Launchpad, I support the $100,000 town contribution to the program because we contribute to other youth programs in the town. So it's not the 100,000, it's the ongoing debt that we are seeing. And I like the idea of a refresh or a restart because what they have right now is in need of some infusion. And I was taken aback sort of by the comment under discussion where contributing factors can be lent to limited knowledge and experience of existing staff and grant writing and reporting. And my point is, you're not going to have a sustainable organization or a predictable organization if you're continually counting on grants to as your source of revenue. And I'm just going to give you sort of a little history lesson on revenue and costing. In my former career, I was principal of community education, which ran all the interest courses in Grey County. And the mandate I got from the trustees at that time, you can run whatever you want, but at the end of the day, no cost to the taxpayer. So you build your programs with a user fee, a cost that includes materials and wages. Now, they were good enough to give us schools at no cost to Hydro. And this is another obstacle that this program is facing. They have to pay a rental every year, which adds to the overall expenditure. But it is what it is, and you have to deal with it. Another thing that I see is they need to stop duplicating services that are being currently offered in boards of education, whether it's a separate school board or the Blue Water Board. And I think, talking to educators and like I pulled up the program for February on Facebook over the weekend, and the February said tutoring. That's all they did all the month with a couple of nice things for a Monday or a Friday and a Tuesday. So that doesn't generate revenue as far as I'm concerned. It's a great service and maybe those kids like it. But another thing that I have a concern is what is their class, what is their experience from an educational point of view for tutoring? Are they qualified teachers who can help them with math, or are they just there to sit down and help them with literacy or other things like that? So, and another thing that has come out, you can understand the importance of technical services. Recently, the Ministry of Education has announced that starting in September of 2024, every student in the province of Ontario is mandated to take a technical education. So if we're delivering it in the school system, I don't think we need to be delivering it in a non-educational setting. It would be nice maybe to set up work experiences tied to that, but I'm sure they're looking at it. And of course, the new mandate where students can start their apprenticeship in their grade 11th year, which is a big plus for for the trade. So there's a lot going on out there, and where the launch pad fits in, as I see it right now, it's more of a social interaction than it is for the skill long-term. However, I support option one. I think they deserve another chance. I talked to a board member this morning. There's enthusiasm, there's excitement. They're willing to buy into it. We need a refresh, but again, I'm not in favor of ongoing deficits, and if that's the case, I think it's a serious issue for us down the road. And they're doing great things, and they've been well recognized. But I'm repeating myself. They have work to do. And I'm glad to see a second counselor, and I've got an idea who would be perfect on that if we get to that point.
Thank you, Councillor Hocking. Were you expecting a response or not? Do I ask April to respond, or you're okay? April, did you want to comment at all, or?
I would say that Dave's comments reinforce why we need to do option one. Because we recognize that the business model isn't generating that revenue. Yes, it's creating that social support and environment that is important as well. But for all elements to be working properly, we have to have the revenue component as well. And just speaking to that whole skill development in high schools, and I know we've discussed this many times before, is yes, the mandate is for Launchpad to focus on youth grade ages 12 to 18. But we've often discussed adult programming and growing what the options are there, so the facility is used. And I'm going to go back to the HIP apprentice and the work that has started there. I think we have a real opportunity to become that apprentice training facility for adults as well. We're seeing many of our employers sending their employees to Kitchener and Waterloo to get their welding certificates or to get their working from heights training or close space training, whatever that may look like. We have very knowledgeable and valuable people in our community that can contribute to programming to support that skill development piece. And yeah, I do support what Dave is saying, or sorry, Councillor Hocking is saying, and that and that we just need to look at that business model, and we need to have it in line with what's happening today and where the opportunities are.
Very good. Deputy Mayor, did I see your hand?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, April, for the report. I do have, conceptually, I do support Launchpad. I have for some time. I think that it's been a great feature to have, but things have changed. And, Councillor Hocking touched on a few of them with the education system, starting to put more emphasis on those opportunities for tradesmen and tradespeople, sorry. I think that, that's maybe changed what the need for Launchpad is as well. I'm concerned with us putting more money into Launchpad, whether it be in kind or financially. I was, and maybe I was misinformed or misunderstood, but I always had the understanding that Launchpad was supposed to be on a self-sustaining program. Like at some point in time, they were going to be creating their own wealth and being able to support themselves. And really what we've seen is it going exactly the opposite direction. The deficit increases year after year. I think that, if option one and some of the things that they're asking for us to do there, we're basically taking more and more ownership of this program the farther we go down that road. And I know one of the questions I had asked earlier was like, who are the employees of Launchpad and who do they report to? If Launchpad fails, are we into a severance situation? They have 4 full-time employees, as I understand. If things happen there, are we going to be liable for that? And the more involved we are, likely the more responsible we become for those types of things. So, like I said, conceptually, I think it was great. I think the world has changed. I always did kind of feel that that project belonged under the education system, and that's where their funding should have come from. So I can't support option one myself personally. I think that I hope they can find a way to create what they need to be successful, but maybe they have to reevaluate the service that they're offering because the world around them has changed as well. So that's some comments more than questions.
Again, April, did you want to comment?
I'm just gonna go back to the investment the town of Hanover has made and doing what we can at this point to help protect that investment, you know? That's what I'm going back to. You're absolutely right. They are reliant on the town of Hanover. They are, and that's kind of that's what has gotten us to this point. So I just kind of take that step back and look at this as an opportunity to help put some accountability towards towards operations and the funding that is being granted to them, and ensuring that we're getting what we need out of that investment.
Thank you. Councillor Fleet, then Councillor Hawking.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, April, for your report. I've always supported the concept of Launchpad. I stood on stage, I support Launchpad. I wasn't told there was a almost $100,000 deficit at Launchpad. I might have stepped back and said, hey, you know, this is $800,000 of taxpayers' dollars, almost $1 million probably when you add it all together, that the mom and dads are trying to put food on their tables and pay for gasoline. We just went through a very hard budget time where we had to, you know, make cuts to keep our taxes as low as we could. So I'm sort of confused on a couple of the comments here. On option number one, as a nonprofit organization, Launchpad is operated by the Board of Directors board. Our town is currently represented on the board by one council representative with voting authority and one staff representative with no voting authority. This is currently an interim executive director operating and leading 4 full-time staff members in the absence anyways of the maternity leave. And then in option number 2, it goes, the statement that operators are at risk of seizing and the town investment to date being forfeited given the center's dependency of town's resources to date. I sort of take this issue or this comment with this comment because my understanding is that Launchpad was not to be dependable annually on taxpayers' dollars. And I don't want this council to be blamed if something, whatever happens with Launchpad goes down. I don't feel it's council's to be blamed for this issue. You know, I've supported the concept of Launchpad. I don't know, somewhere along the way, it's lost its focus. We just went, like I said, we just went through a very difficult budget period, and I gotta support option 2.
Councillor Hawking.
Thank you, Worship. I want to thank April for the position on. We've protect our investment of $800,000, and the reason I'm voting for option 1 is I believe they have an opportunity presented to them that they turn this ship around and get it headed in the right direction. There's a lot of resource time has gone into that. And to pull the rug out of from them immediately would not service the best interest of our investment. I think a heart-to-heart talk with the I'm sure the board is aware of it, but also to sit down with the entire operation staff included and say, folks, here's the option we've given you. You've got a year to turn this around, and if at the end of the year, this is the outcome. I'm sure they will rise to the challenge. They'll get motivated because I'm sure they believe in the same wonderful attributes of that program as we do. So all what I'm saying is, let's give them an opportunity to turn it around. Thank you.
I'm going to go over to this side for a minute. Any comments or questions? Councillor Sacco.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Hawking. I believe that, yes, we need a chance. We have talked at length about rebranding Launchpad. We are living in a different world, Deputy Mayor, but this world is going to be made up of more and more trades, and we're having difficulty getting people in the trades. You know what it's like to get a plumber these days. It's not easy, or an electrician to come to your house. And I think it's important. Launchpad's looking at involving field trips for grade 6 students so that we can bring more people in, because that brings in revenue for Launchpad. So I think that's significant. And I think this is the time to do it. Give us one more year. You mentioned getting together with staff, Councillor Hawking. We're doing just that tomorrow night. Our meeting is with all of the Launchpad staff. We're going to, with the board of directors, we're talking. We're going to examine what their thoughts are, what their goals are. They know what the issues are. I'm sure they're listening to tonight's meeting, and we'll be talking further about that. So thank you for your questions and your comments.
Thank you, Councillor Sacco. Councillor Cable, then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the report and the update, April. I think that the concept of Launchpad as a skills training center for youth is really what set it apart from other youth centers that are in the area. And certainly, as was mentioned, we know that there's a significant need for skilled tradespersons in the workforce. We know that will increase as we go forward. I think from my perspective, there's a few significant items that need to be addressed. First of all, the wholesale sustaining piece, and making sure that we're preventing future deficits and coming up with financial policies to make sure that does not continue. Secondly, I think just focusing on that instructor roster, right? And how do you find qualified individuals that are willing to give their time, or how will that structure work in order to sustain the program? And my third point, which I was going to say was my, I think, most important, Councillor Hawking stole right from me, that I don't think we should be duplicating the services of other ministries. And I think the Deputy Mayor made a similar point. And I do worry that perhaps, there's too much overlap between what's being offered at Launchpad and the programs that are available in our local high schools. But I see that there's also potential opportunities for us to look at programs like electrical, right, or plumbing, or masonry, or other trades that aren't offered within our local high schools. And so how can we, move forward on some things that don't duplicate? So personally, I am in favor of option 1, which in my view of the options, option 2 was that we would continue as we are, status quo. And option 1, I think, provides that additional level of support and oversight, which is significantly needed at this point in time. And hopefully by next year, we'll be sitting here in a different situation. And if not, then, another decision could be made. I think my one worry or question is around staff time, because certainly I think the way that option 1's laid out, the staff time from the town will be significant in order to take on this financial oversight to the degree that it's listed in here. It really seems to me that the town is going to be completely in control of the finances for Launchpad. So do staff feel that they have the time required to provide that level of oversight?
April?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I'll let Chris comment on this as well. We are providing financial and HR and economic development support currently. You're absolutely right. This does increase it. But again, I'm just going to go back to prioritizing our investment and just trying to find the time to be able to help them through this for this year. And, we'd have to look at our work plans and what we're able to do, but in hopes that we can set them up for that sustainable future, that they will not rely on our resources anymore.
Chris, did you want to comment?
Just so you know, we do provide them with reports on a monthly basis, and it's provided to them. It's supposed to be at the board. Again, we're supposed to be at arm's length. We provide everything we can. We do all the financials. We do everything for them. Every month I tell them, you're in a deficit position. You need to look at this. You need to do this. Again, I'm on just one voice. I'm just the town. It has to be the board that says this. What you're asking us to do now, we're working on a budget, trying to get them, but now we're going to be making cuts saying you're not doing this program, you're not doing this program, those kind of things. That still has to be the board's approval, but we're trying to get it to the point where the dollars balance. I think what their problem has been, correct me if I'm wrong, April, they applied for grants, then they get those programs going, they continue with those programs and have no money again. And this is the deficits they're getting in. And we keep telling them, if you have no money, you cannot do those programs, but they continue to do those programs without the monies coming in, assuming they were going to get more. I think that's the biggest issue that they come up with. We've told them a couple of times, without the grants, you can't have the expenses. Same with, you shouldn't have the staff unless you have the grants to cover the staff monies. It's like anything. If you don't have the revenues, you can't make the expenses, just like doing your budgets at home. But I think the problem, as you have all brought forward, is that the town covers all the expenses. They don't really see it. So out of sight, out of mind, I'll just keep spending, right?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I look back and I think of the conversations we've had over the last year or so around this table, and you know, we did discuss. They came and made a presentation to us, asked for another $50,000, and at that point in time, we said, no, we don't see that in the future. They've had a lot of messages sent to them that they have not taken to heart and changed anything. And now they're just coming back asking for more money again. And that's what really concerns me here, is the fact that we said we would honor that $100,000 commitment again for 2023, and we've done that. But now they're asking for more money, just doing it in a different way, if I could say that. And that concerns me, that they aren't getting the message. And I think we need to hold firm on what we said and stick to our option 2.
Sherry, did you have a comment?
I was just going to add that, you know, I think, again, April has really keyed in on the investment that we have made to date, and needing to protect and help to sustain this operation if we can do that. And so we are taking some added steps, yes, and involving more to do so. But that oversight and what's the word I'm looking for? Oversight and knowledge of how that budgeting and financial piece works and how we're connected to that, I think is been a bit of a missing piece in the past. We've been a little bit arm's length from that. This will put us a little more in the trenches, yes, for the time being, in the hopes that we then set the basis for them to move forward in a positive direction.
Thank you. Other Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sherry's comment, financial support. We've given them almost $1 million in financial support. Say if things turn around at Launchpad, are we going to see financial support back like what the Police Association has done? They give us $100,000 back in 2 year budget 2 years ago. Will we see money back from Launchpad?
I would expect it would go into reserves.
Right, sorry, Your Worship, yes, yeah, we haven't got to that point of discussing that, but I would say that if that is a want or desire of council, that we bring that back to them and we build that into our planning process.
Well, we keep talking financial support, so it goes both ways, I think, but anyways.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, and I think this goes back again to us when we were encouraging they be sustainable, meaning that our annual contribution could be decreased. So we're in a position right now that we're saying, yes, you have this deficit, you are responsible for it. So we're creating a loan for you and a repayment plan. And then in hopes that once we get them, or we're kind of terming this as relaunching Launchpad, once they get to that point, then we can start to decrease or not contribute on an annual basis moving forward.
So in year 5, instead of contributing $100,000, it would be 90,000, and year 6 would be 80,000. It would be right down till we get to 0, so that they're learning to expense what they have. Chris, you had a comment?
Yes, Councillor Fleet talked about the police. You may remember, or maybe not, back in 2012, they disbanded disbanded, I guess what they call the dispatch, and there was a major deficit. There was over $500,000 deficit on the police that the town embarked upon, did it back as a repayment on loan. The police over the next 5 years were able to get it back up into this position they are today, and any excess now goes into their reserves. So their money that we provide them, if they save it that year, it goes back to their reserves, except on the case in 2020 when we had COVID, when we had that major downturn in revenues, then they returned back some of that money because they didn't need it as much. So just so you know, you have done this before for another group, and it was police because of the major issue. They relaunched the police, redid it in the direction, but it took a good 3 to 4 years to get them back on pace.
Okay, Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure if you'd know this, April, but I'm wondering, does having a significant loan on Launchpad's balance sheet impact their ability to apply for grants? Like, is that seen as a negative if they have this $95,000 sitting as a loan?
I think I'll answer that one. Either way, it's going to show that they have a huge deficit. They're going to say, well, you can't handle your money as it is right now. So they're taking the steps to go ahead and get rid of the deficit they have and trying to repay it back. So basically, there's going to be on their liability side a loan repayment, no different. And there's a reduction then on their reserves are gone pretty much. And then the bottom line is their fund balance is now at the 0 point that we require. They don't have a bank account, so it's basically part of ours. Makes it very difficult. It just shows when we go do our financial statements on our end, you're going to see Launchpad at 0, but then they're on their side, there's going to be a loans receivable on our side and a loan payable on their side, as if they went to the bank. Just like we have amounts to be recovered, you'll see that we have a loan for the P&H Center on our end. So it's there as an amount that we owe. So it's a liability side. I don't know grants wise, because I mean, think of all the municipalities that have huge grants that spend over 3 million a year just paying back loans. They're eligible for grants at all times.
Okay, as long as that's not going to impact, that's fine. I didn't know if we were better to, for example, clear the deficit and then say that next year your donation is 68,000, whatever dollars, right? Like, is that a better way for them to operate? Right, that they don't have a deficit, but they know it's 68, 68, 68, and we're collecting it back that way.
Through you, Your Worship, that's entirely up to council if that's the direction you wish to do. I still have to keep track of it somewhere that money is owing to us, whether internally or not, just like I do when we do internal borrowing from one place. Basically, our reserves are sitting on the liabilities. The amount in the reserves is lower because we've taken an internal loan on that. That's the difference. So it's working the same way. They're basically borrowing from our reserves and then paying it back just like any other department does. However, because they have to have their own separate balance sheet, that's why it has to show up that they have that. If that's the direction you wish to do, I can do it that way and just have it on our side of the books and not on theirs at all.
So I may say a good grant writer will provide an explanation at the bottom of the balance sheet explaining what that deficit is and what is happening to correct that deficit. It's better to be honest and share everything you can when you're applying for grants. And if you explain it, people understand it. Other comments? So I just want to say that I think with the town providing direct leadership and specific direction with good oversight and adhering to the business plan that is going to be developed, I think this will give Launchpad an opportunity to become sustainable. And if we have maybe a report by fall, an update of what's happening, we'll have a good idea of what's going on. All right, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of, no, well, now wait a minute. I'm going to speak to the clerk because we need to amend the motion to appoint one additional council representative with a name to the Launchpad Board of Directors. If we can do that, do we have to vote on the amendment first?
First of all, incorporating.
First of all, I'm wondering if their bylaws permit that. Launchpad's operational bylaws in terms of governance of the board.
In what regard? That they do have a policy for governance of the board, but it would need to be updated to reflect these changes.
So they need to update theirs first, or can we just appoint?
We could appoint a member pending the amendment of their governance bylaw for board membership.
Councillor Hawking.
Yeah, I'd like to. Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'd like to nominate Brandon Cable as our second council rep. Brandon has experience at Launchpad. I think he was involved in the early days of its operation. He's got great ideas, and he'll also make sure that he's got the pencil to that it runs in a positive way. So Brandon would be an excellent addition on that board.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be a member of the board? Councillor Fleet, you were going to.
I was just wondering, when this comes to a vote, should we make this a recorded vote?
I will you can have a recorded vote, which is a different process than me just saying these people voted in favor, these people voted against. But if you want a recorded vote, there's no issue whatsoever.
Yeah, I'd like a recorded vote. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to ask Councillor Cable, are you willing to accept that nomination?
Well, I would be delighted. Thank you.
Thank you. Look at that. Now my mic was. So council, I'll say that again, Councillor Cable has accepted to sit on the, to be appointed to the Board of Directors of Launchpad. So the motion states that we receive report ED 0223 and we, the second part that council, go ahead.
So the draft motion I've prepared is that report ED 0223 Launchpad organization and operational status be received, and that council support option 1 is presented in report ED 0223 and appoint Councillor Brandon Cable as the second council representative to the Launchpad Board of Directors.
The clerk does it much better. Thank you. Okay, so I have to check that it was moved by Councillor Hudson and seconded by Councillor Sackle. You're okay with the amendment? Okay, so I will call the vote. No, I won't. We're doing a recorded vote. So this is option 1.
I vote against.
Councillor Harold Fleet,
I vote against.
Councillor Dave Hawking,
I vote for.
Councillor Carol Hudson,
I vote for.
Councillor Brandon Cable,
I vote for the motion.
Councillor Susan Sackle.
I vote for.
We have 4. Councillor Mayor Patterson, sorry.
In favor.
So we have 5 in favor, 2 opposed.
Thank you, council. Good discussion. And thanks to April and Chris for your work and your upcoming work. Okay, item 9.3 is report PW 0523. The subject is the 2022 Drinking Water System Summary Report. It's from Mr. Cooper, our Director of Public Works. And I need a mover and seconder to put this one on the floor. And I'll take Councillor Hawking and Deputy Mayor Dickert. Take it away, Ron.
Thank you, Worship. The background and the requirement of this drinking water summary report is there's a Schedule 22 of the Ontario Drinking Water Regulation. 17003 requires that members of council be provided with a report providing specific details related to compliance and capacity of our system. And this report is to be provided by March 31st of the following year, which it applies. So the summer report we're providing to you is for the year 2022. It has been prepared by our Chief Operator, Ted Knopp, who is also available if there would be any specific questions of him when we go through the report. I will take you through it. The report summarizes the chemicals utilized in the water treatment process, which we're using chlorine for disinfection, a chemical known as PAX XL52. It's to reduce aluminum in the water supply, and a coagulation to assist in filtration of our Rural Lake and well number 2 supply. We also use hydrogen peroxide for taste and odor of our Rural Lake, which was being put into place, started May 31st, and it was discontinued January 10th of actually 2023 for that summer fall season. The yearly average demand for supply entering the plant was 5,662 cubic meters, representing 36.8% of our treatment capacity. Our total supply increased from 1,786 cubic meters in 2021 to 1,818,106 cubic meters in 2022, which was actually a 10.1% increase. The maximum daily flow was 8,320 cubic meters, representing 54% of our supply. That occurred May 19th, and that was when the downtown fire was ongoing. The Hanover water supply and treatment capacity is adequate to meet our future demands, and due to fluctuating demands, treatment processing requirements, we can operate up to somewhere between 60 and 65% of our maximum capacity. And as indicated previously, the maximum daily flow represented 54% of our treatment capacity that occurred on May 19th. Unaccounted for water, which is another calculation which we do, is we look at the metered flow coming out of the treatment plant versus consumption. Then we take into account estimates of some unmetered flow, which we know of activities that are ongoing out in the system. We're coming up with 10.5% or 155.483 cubic meters for 2022. That has actually increased from a 7.5% in 2021. For 2023, we are actually engaging an outside company to come in, check valves and hydrants to do leak detection throughout our system. They use sonic detection, leak detective equipment, and it's to go through a systematic approach of our distribution system, listing on valves, hydrants, to see if we can pin down some leaks. And what will be doing is giving us a report back, identify areas, and to pinpoint in where the higher percentage of leaks may be. I think it's important with this unaccounted for water increasing that we get some outside assistance to help us. And that's what we're proceeding with in 2023. The 2022 report will be available at the municipal office and in the public information document, which is available at the Civic Center, and public will be advised on their water billing of locations to access the report. Just to take you through the report briefly, just to kind of summarize the pages that we got in your council package. Pages 60 to 66 of the council package. That's kind of the first section of the report. It's got a monthly summary. It shows the minimum, maximum, and average daily flows coming out of all three sources of our facility, both volumes coming into the treatment plant and what is pumped to the town in terms of treated water. So it goes through that for all of the months. The next section here is on water loss estimation, which is on page 67. And it goes through our calculation, taking into account estimates for known activities where there was unaccounted for water. And it comes up with our adjusted unaccounted for water. And as I previously indicated, being 10.51% for the year of 2022. The next section is section number 3. That actually starts on page 68, and it's a monthly summary of our flows and also shows pump run time hours. The next page, which is 69, shows chlorine and turbidity levels, which we're measuring and monitoring constantly. It shows minimum, maximum, and average on a monthly basis. And pages 70 to 81, which actually shows all our sampling on a weekly basis. Our results we give back indicating total coliform and E. coli of the sample results for the year on those pages. Pages 82 to 84 show actually our sampling sites. When we go out in the field, we're showing what we're taking, recording as free chlorine, which is the total amount of chlorine in the system. The more important number I feel on there, which is the free chlorine level, which is actually the amount of chlorine which is available for disinfection in the system. Page 85 shows a quarterly sample, which we're required to do in terms of in-plant monitoring as well as results that we get done from certified labs. The final page in section 6 of it shows a calculation. It shows THMs, which is trihalmethanes, which is disinfection products in our system. We're showing average, it's 36 micrograms per liter. The maximum concentration is 100 micrograms per liter. So we're well within the requirements. That's taken at the furthest point in the system. We have another check, which is required related to disinfection products in the system. It's called HA5, which that's acetic acids. The maximum concentration on that is 80 micrograms per liter. We're at 17.2, and that's actually taken at the closest point of entry to our distribution system. So in both of those categories, we're well under the acceptable concentrations. The recommendation is the report PW 0523, the 2022 drinking water system summary report be received, and the council acknowledge receipt of the report as per section 22 of the Ontario Regulation 17003, and the report be made available at the municipal office. If there would be any questions about the report, either myself or Ted would try and answer them for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. I do want to say that's a really good idea, having the third party come in and check for leaks, and maybe we don't want to know where they all are. We might be doing more work, but it's important so we can account for all the water. My question, Ron, is starting on page 85 with the lab analysis. It talks about conductivity. What is that? And is it better to have a lower number or a higher number?
We may be getting a little bit technical on that parameter, so I'll see if Ted's on the line. He can speak to that one.
Ted, did you hear that question? Maybe.
Yep.
Good.
So I believe conductivity is basically it's kind of just showing the how do we really explain it? You really gotta be a tough one. It's kind of how to transfer electric current through the water, I guess. To be quite honest, I honestly don't know what a purely amazing number is. I know I just want a consistent number in our water. I want it to be right around that 500 to 900 and keep it in that range. I don't want to see it drop too low. I don't want to see it go too high, because then there's a change in our water, and I don't really want that. If that kind of answers it.
It does, and I'm glad you're monitoring it. Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is kind of a follow-up to the question I had when we were talking about the draft plan. We said we're at 36.8%, and that's an actual usage number. Where are we at when we add in all our approved draft plans and subdivisions that are in the works? Can you answer that, Ron, or is that something that you need to take away?
We're still fairly decent in terms of capacity, in terms of our water plant. I think the big thing is we show on licenses that we can get much more volume out of that. Operationally, maybe a little more challenged than that, but I think we have the volumes there, and if we get into growth in the future, I would say water treatment, there's ways and means in which we could do some changes operationally or even at the plant to be able to get more out of the plant. Although an extreme increase, we would be taxed a bit, but we're in fairly decent shape.
So with the approved development that's on the books right now and the stuff in draft approval, are we at 50% or 40%? And maybe it's an answer you can't give me tonight, but just wondering if you could put a bit more context.
An exact number I maybe couldn't come up with, but there is assurances what's approved out there now. The water supply would not be a significant issue.
Good. All right. I will call the question. All in favor of report PW 0523. That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Ted. Okay, 9.4 is report PW 0623. The subject is reconstruction of 11th Street from 17th to 21st Avenue. It's the tender. Again, it's from Mr. Cooper, our Director of Public Works, and I need a mover and seconder to put that on the floor. I have Councillor Cable and Councillor Sacco. Ron?
Thank you, Worship. This here report has to do with recommendation acceptance of the tender that were received for the reconstruction of 11th Street from 17th to 21st Avenue. This project has been identified as a priority in the town's asset management, and the project was included in the 2023 capital budget. We actually worked in 22. In 2022, we did a section of 11th Street between 15th and 17th Avenue. It's kind of a 2-year phase project. Now we're continuing further to the east, doing the section from 17th to 21st Avenue. Going back on it, this area was originally constructed in the 1960s. It's got the wider surface treated road, no sidewalks. We had some flow monitoring done of our sanitary sewer system in 2020, and it had identified this section that there are some deficiencies in the sanitary sewer in that section. The project involves replacement of sanitary water storm infrastructure, as well as road reconstruction, including curb and gutter. And in consideration of the town's sidewalk guidelines, a new sidewalk on the south side of 11th Street will be installed. So this carries on the sidewalk network on 11th Street, continuing easterly from 15th Avenue. Once we get to 21st Avenue, then there is another walkway which leads out further, taking us to 22nd Avenue. So it continues in on the sidewalk network loop there. The tender was advertised in the Post and on Bingo. We had 5 tenders received by the tender closing date of March 2nd, 2003. The prices are listed there, but we had good response in terms of the tendering. We had Cobite Engineering review the tenders for completeness and accuracy. They provided a letter and indicates that Cobite is recommending the acceptance from Omega Contractors, Inc., and that is the low bidder. They have previously completed work, and that would be the reconstruction of 7th Avenue from 12th to 16th Street. That was back in 2018. The quality of their work and ability to work cooperatively with the residents was favorable. The tender stipulates that the project be completed by October 27th with 90 working day allowance. We have indicated notice of the project has previously been forwarded to the residents, and a further follow-up notice will be circulated once we have confirmed with the contractor an exact start time. Indications with the contractor following the tender closing is that they would like to get started mid-May. So acceptance of this tender moves us forward to give them a formal acceptance of the project, and then we can commence our talks with them on exact scheduling. Financial implications is that all of the categories in which we break the tender analysis down have come in under budget. The tender by Omega Contractors at $324,753.60 under budget, or 16.1%. That was the number that we carried, and that was information that we had been provided by Cobite in terms of our budgeting when that was completed in September of 2022. The link to strategic plan is environment and sustainable municipal operations. And the recommendation is that report PW 0623 reconstruction of 11th Street from 17th to 21st Ave tender be received, and the project be awarded to Omega Contractors, Inc. for a total cost of $1,693,246.46 plus HST, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to enter into a contract with Omega Contractors, Inc. And if council would have any further questions, I would be pleased to address them.
Thank you, Ron. Any questions? Councillor Fleet?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ron, for that report. Will this affect the parking at the Missionary Church?
Yeah, as we move forward, the angle parking on there with the narrower road would be moved into parallel parking. So it's going to eliminate, a couple of additional spots there along the roadway, yes.
Because right now it's angle parking, correct? All the way up to 21st?
That is correct. There is, well, no, not all the way to 21st, just portion in front of the missionary church, and then there's a couple apartment buildings that there is some angle parking. The way when the road is wider, that will be parallel parking when the project is completed.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I don't know if there's an intersection in this project that this might apply to, but when I know myself personally, when I drive down 17th Ave and I come to 11th Street, the fact that you're on this really, really wide street and all of a sudden it's quite narrow and there's curbs there. Is there a way of, or could we add some delineators or something there that would identify that a little bit better? Because like I said, it is quite a bit narrower than than the street you're coming down. So I don't know if that's been expressed as a concern from anybody else. It's just an observation I've had as I'm driving down there and wondering, the next street up, I think, is a T intersection. So it's a stop sign and it's a little more evident, but when you're coming down 17th Ave, those curbs really do jut out.
Ron?
Yeah, I understand your concern, and I know that even when that got completed last year and in the fall, I know we ended up putting up some delineator marks kind of as soon as snow plowing caught in, because it was something that kind of caught our attention there. So some delineating markings at the starting or ending of the curbs, however you see it, I guess it would be a starting at the approaches of them would be appropriate when we're narrowing down at such intersections.
Other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor of report PW 0623. That is carried. Thank you. Item 9.5 is report PW 0723. It is the cemetery bylaw, and it's from Mr. Cooper, our Director of Public Works, and I need a mover and seconder to put that on the floor. Councillor Hocking and Deputy Mayor Dickert. Ron?
Thank you, Worship. This report here deals with an updated new cemetery bylaw, which we have been working on with staff, including Tanya Patterson, our administrative assistant deputy clerk, and Vicki McDonald clerk since the fall. And we've had discussions with Raymond Authority of Ontario, known as BAO, to provide their input into it. And we've had a number of changes when we went through the bylaw. We've had discussions back with them to and some pointers in terms of when we're working through the bylaw. The current bylaw, which was originally put together, bylaw 275912, was amended by 288915 in July of 2015, was approved by the Register of the Federal Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act. And it requires revisions to reflect the discontinuation of the cemetery board and provide improved clarity for various articles and procedures. So our discussions with BAO indicated that it would be better to update and provide a new draft bylaw. What I can do is take you through the bylaw as attached, and I've noted on here sections in which we specifically got comments back from BAO, and they required that us to make changes to this one. Section 1, which covers the definitions, and there was definitions related to care and maintenance fund contract, the definition of Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act, interment rights certificate, and interment rights holder, required specific revisions as per BAO recommendations. So we've updated them accordingly. Section number 3, cemetery operation responsibilities. We've updated that, and I think that was to reflect the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act. And there was a term in there regarding the public register, which required to be updated. Section 5, we updated wording in that one, and that was regard the care and maintenance, also related to the requirements of the Funeral, Burial Act, Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act. Section 6 was updated regarding the transfer and repurchase of interment rights, which previously bylaw was a little bit incorrect. We've updated it, which in terms of reselling the interment rates, they cannot sell it to a third party. We can buy it back from the town, so it's updated in section 6 to reflect that. Section 7, the interments and inurnments, updated in, well, actually 3 different sections, clarifying that 2 business days notice required before an interment and inurnment is to be taken in place. Interments and inurnments on Saturday, it was changed from the 3 p.m. to have it be at the funeral at the cemetery by 12 noon. And we've clarified in that there's no scattering of cremated remains or animal remains is not permitted anywhere within the cemetery. Section 8, disinterments has been updated as per requirements of Braidman, Ontario's review. Section 11 has been updated, and that's regarding monuments, markers, and niche doors. One of the items there on the niches is to allow etched designs and pictures on the niche doors. And second thing we've updated there is we provided clarity in sizes of monuments and flat markers that can be placed on the various size plots. That was not in the previous bylaw. Provided that for clarity. Section 12, rules for contractors and their employees, updated the requirements for contractors regarding their WSIB clearance certificates to provide that to us and ensure they got liability coverage. Section 13 was updated. And that was also reference to the Funeral, Burial, Cremation Services Act or Provincial Services Offences Act. Regarding what actually happens on this, we've got the draft bylaw. There is a requirement for notification and procedure. So we have to post notice for 4 weeks at the cemetery with signage. We have to put an ad in the local newspaper. And there is a requirement for places that provided markers and monuments at the cemetery. We have to provide them with a copy of the bylaw. So the process is that we're going to get started with this process. We send it back to Braidman, Ontario to get them to further review of it. And the bylaw will be coming back to council for its final review after the registrar has been approved. So that being said, the recommendation is the report PW 0723 cemetery bylaw be received and that council authorize staff to move forward with the revised cemetery bylaw as per the Braidman of Ontario's submission procedures for filing cemetery bylaws, and that staff bring forward a bylaw for adoption by a council once approval from the registrar. Cemetery Burial Services Act 2002 has been obtained. if council would have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Ron. Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, your worship. And thank you, Ron, for trying to explain all of this. Just a question for you regarding page 102. Internments and the burial hours being changed on Saturday until noon hour from 3 o'clock. Is that going to change how the funeral homes are having to conduct their business as well? Because I know a lot of funerals start at 11 on a Saturday. And are they going to get through that and be able to still make that work?
The majority of the ones which we see happening, especially on a Saturday, they're usually arranged for Friday morning. What this means is they need to be at the cemetery up there by 12 noon. I don't be seeing something that will be difficult to obtain.
So it's changed from 3 o'clock to 12 for the staffing of the people doing the burial. I'm just a little unsure why we're not accommodating the families more so than the staff.
But the 12 o'clock to be noon to be at the cemetery, that means by the time we're all finished and cleaned up on the Saturday, that could realistically be a 1:30 or a 2 o'clock. That's kind of why normal business hours, when we're talking Monday to Friday, what we're saying to be at the cemetery is by 3, realizing that we've got another 1.5 to 2 hours time to be there before we got our work completed.
Go ahead, Councillor Hudson.
I'm really not in agreement with the fact that we would be putting out a family in a time of need just because of hours for staffing. That doesn't sit well because a lot of families do have to work their funerals around the family and their working schedule as well. So Saturday is often a day that the people actually do not have to work. And so to expect them then to try to set their funeral times earlier in the day so that the staffing doesn't have to stay later. That doesn't sit well with me.
Ron?
I guess when we had looked at it, we're on a Saturday, if it is on a Saturday, there's not a lot of them. We're bringing in staff for that event. And we kind of would like to see that if we're getting it set up, that staff would be there and have our work finished up by still going to put them in a 1:30, 2 o'clock somewhere that time in the afternoon. It's usually a one-off event, and we're bringing staff in specifically for that reason.
So Ron, if it was requested by the family or the funeral home to be later than 12 noon, what would happen?
I think it is something that we could look at on a case-by-case basis.
Any other comments with regards to that? Councillor Hudson?
Can we make an amendment on this to change that time? I'm just not convinced that if somebody asks if they could have it at a later time, that would actually happen when we have this particular document in place.
Other comments? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, when you say we're bringing people in, would you not just be bringing them in a little later? And there wouldn't really be any additional hours required. It's just a different time frame.
You would be correct on that, midday.
Councillor Cable?
I would support an amendment to a later time. I don't know if Councillor Hudson would like to propose a time, whether it's 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock.
I think if you keep it consistent with the 3 o'clock, so then it's the same across the board.
I don't see any other comments. Ron, any other issues if we leave it at 3 o'clock?
No, if council requests, we can change it back to 3.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask the clerk to, how do we put that in there?
So the bylaw is just a draft bylaw at this time. So if council wishes to change the motion to state that they support it as amended with that time change back to 3 o'clock for burials on Saturdays. If I could maybe just make a note to that typically on Saturdays, as Ron noted, we do have very few burials that are requested past noon, mainly because on a Saturday, the services occur at 10 or 11. So they are actually ready to come up to the cemetery by noon. And I'm not sure, Ron, the staffing impact if we're also doing, because we do winter burials, what would the impact be, if any, on staffing that have been that have come in at 3 to plow, to have them again be available for a burial? I don't know if that's an impact as well.
It's usually on Saturday when we have a cemetery. For the most part, it's a call in. It's pretty well a separate call in anyways. The odd time, if we're out working, it gets worked in with our mix of what we're doing, but for the most part, it's a separate call in on Saturday.
So if these burials are on Saturdays are a rarity, it would be okay to leave it at 3 o'clock because there shouldn't be much issue with that. Just thinking about that. Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Worship. Ron, are most of the services, funeral services in the morning? Do you see afternoon services? Say if it's a 11 o'clock mass or a 10 o'clock mass and it's over at 12, that's a long period of time to go from 11 to 3.
I think a lot of them end up being that it's, I don't think we have had too many that would actually be later on in the afternoon on a Saturday. I think some maybe a little more through the week, because there could be one because people are working and they might schedule their time off, so it might be starting at 1 o'clock at the funeral home, but on the Saturday when all the people are around, a lot of those at the funeral home are like at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they're typically up at the cemetery by 11-ish.
Did you want to comment, Vicky, or not? No?
No, I was just wanted to concur with Ron that, yeah, on a Saturday, typically, any services, as I mentioned before, are in the morning.
So if that is typical, we can leave it at 3 o'clock. So I'm going to call the question, as long as the mover, Councillor Hawking, and the seconder, Deputy Mayor, are okay with the supporting this as amended, leaving it at 3 o'clock. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. I would like to suggest we take a 10-minute break. Or, okay, let's say 12 minutes. We'll be back at 6:20. Okay, so we are now back in session from a recess. And we're on item 9.6. This is report CAO 04-23. The subject is the Town of Hanover 2023 to 2027 strategic plan. It is from Sherry Walden, our CAO, and I need a mover and seconder to put this item on the floor. And I have Councillor Sackle and Councillor Cable. Sherry?
Thank you, Your Worship. So council, you will recall that our first strategic plan was adopted in 2010, and subsequently we've had 2 reviews and updates with the assistance of a third-party consultant in 2015 and 2019. Our 2019 process reconfirmed our vision, our corporate values, our valued features of our community, and it detailed our 4 strategic directions and goals with prioritized recommendations. And that's guided council's work as well as our budget allocations in the past term. The 2023 budget included the undertaking of a strategic plan process to establish our current and future municipal and community priorities to manage the direction of this term of council and beyond. The scope of work includes leading the process and developing a 4-year achievable municipal strategic plan framework, the tools and templates that will facilitate that ongoing planning and collaboration, and responsible management to align those strategic initiatives, to define clear priorities, to conduct and facilitate in-person meetings with council staff and community stakeholders to seek and assess that input, to conduct a statistically valid public input survey, and then identify roles and responsibilities for the community stakeholders and the town in the implementation of the strategic plan, preparing those short and long-term recommended strategies for the plan's implementation. Once completed, the strategic plan will support our vision and help the town to identify our priorities and allocate, and again, help us make those decisions around budget allocation. An RFP, request for proposal, was advertised on Bid and Go and the town's website, and 3 proposals were received by the closing date and time. And as noted in your report, we had 3 companies provide a proposal to complete the work. Myself and April, our economic development manager, assessed the proposals based on the criteria that was included in the RFP, and that included the understanding of the project objectives, the proposed execution of the work plan and the timelines, their firm's specific municipal strategic planning experience, the clarity and completeness of the proposal, and the overall value. We are recommending that Linton Consulting Services Incorporated be retained to complete the strategic plan. This firm has completed a number of municipal plans, including strategic plans, business plans, and organizational reviews. And their experience and knowledge of their staff team, both through professional work and lived experience as municipal politician and staff member, were cited as a strength. And again, the preferred choice, I already noted the qualifications and lived experience of the assigned staff, but they possessed and presented an understanding and approach for completion of the project. They have clearly worded and inspirational strategic priorities and goals have been made a priority, and their commitment to achievable actions assigned to department and a measurement tool providing that as part of their final product. So those are the reasons that we felt their proposal was better suited for our needs and our work. The references contacted shared positive input, and based on the award of date of March 21st being tomorrow, they would have indicated they would start the work as early as early 2023 and then have it completed by August 2023. We had included in our budget $27,000 for this work, and the proposal by Linton Consulting Services is within our allocated budget. The recommendation before you is that report CAO-04-23 Town of Hanover 2023-2027 strategic plan be received, that the project be awarded to Linton Consulting Services Incorporated for a total cost of $27,000 plus HST, and that the mayor and CAO be authorized to enter into a contract with Linton Consulting Services Incorporated. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions? Comments? Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sherry, does the 27,000 include any disbursements? Like if they're going to do a mail out survey or anything like that, it would include postage, or is that an additional fee?
It includes disbursements. I believe it's an online survey. So if it's an actual hard copy that people would want to complete, we would have it available here for pickup that they could do that, or we could mail the incidental few that would be appropriate for.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. So all in favor of report CAO-04-23. That is carried. Thank you. Item 9.7, this is report CAO-05-23. The subject is the Trail Bridges tender. It's from Sherry Walden, our CAO, and I need a mover and seconder to put this on the floor. Councillor Hudson and Councillor Cable. Sherry?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to try and summarize the background section of the report as much as possible. It's detailed in the report that those who maybe are listening online can access the report through the council package. But in 2018, this is when the Trail Bridges project started. So 4.5 years ago, when you think about it. Our inspection during that year resulted in engineers' recommendation that bridges 2 and 4 be closed to pedestrian and vehicle traffic. And just for council and the public that are listening, the bridges are numbered starting at the concession 2, which is just the entrance past the cemetery, the trail's entrance past the cemetery. They're numbered from 1 to 7 from that point. So bridge 1 is the very first bridge you come to, bridge 2, bridge 3, bridge 4, etc. So again, bridges 2 and 4 through that 2018 inspection, it was recommended they be closed to pedestrian and vehicle traffic. In 2019, we did have $250,000 approved for bridge restoration. However, as we begin to investigate what that looked like, it became apparent that repair and restoration only would not necessarily be in the best long-term solution for the trail bridges, as that repair and restoration, I don't want to say it was a Band-Aid fix, but it's like a Band-Aid fix because eventually you would need to invest in further repair and or rehabilitation or replacement. And also, we then applied in fall of 2019 to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the culture, recreation, and community culture and recreation stream for the replacement of Bridge 1, 2, and 3 and the refurbishment of replacement of Bridge 1, 2, and 4. My note is incorrect here, and refurbishment of Bridge 3. At that time, it was deemed, we looked at some other solutions at that time, and that replacement provided us with the best long-term solution, because replacement would mean 75-year life for those bridges that are replacement. 2020 was a bit of a waiting game. We were awaiting direction of the funding. 2021, we learned that the funding had been approved, and we completed the various investigative studies, and Aboriginal consultation began to lead towards 2022, when we completed our municipal class environmental assessment. Bridge design was completed and the tender specifications confirmed. So again, we've been 4.5 years getting to this construction phase. In the discussion portion of your report, the tender was released early, trying to think if it was just before Christmas or just after Christmas, but it was in late in the year, early in the new year. The tender was advertised on Bid and Go and the town website, and 3 tenders were received by the closing time. Within the report, you're provided with, there is option 1 and option 2. Option 1 is the original scope of the tender, and the 3 prices received are included there, outlining part 1, part 2, provisional and contingency. So part 1 is bridges 1 and 2. Part 2 is bridges 3 and 4, and the provisional is some incidentals as that may be required as extras with some of the bridge work, and the contingency is really to deal with the unexpected. What if we get into something we weren't expecting, and it provides us that opportunity to have a contingency amount that we don't have to come back to council to have that pre-approved before going forward. Given that the prices provided were above our allocated budget at that time, I reached out to our engineering firm to indicate what would be the option for a reduced scope to be within our accommodate within our approved budget. And we have our right within the tender document we have that provision to either permit the owner to accept or reject any and all tenders within, whether in whole or in part. So we can consider awarding the contract in part. So to ensure that there is no change in the ranking of the bidders, the reduced scope option was applied to all submissions. And as you will see, the recommended firm comes within our budget allocation. Reduced scope would mean that for Bridge 3, we are removing some of the work items to complete it at a later date, such as the timber deck replacement. We really would only be completing the environmental protection measures, the access to work, the granular material and plywood for the bridge deck, and installation of new timber surface and curb railings. And that resulted in about $151,517 savings. For all bridges, we would be removing the approach railing. So the approach railing is it's kind of that railing just before you get to the actual bridge. Again, an added safety element. And then the contingency would be reduced accordingly in that scenario. The tenders were reviewed by Tatham Engineering for the completeness and accuracy, and the letter is noted recommending the acceptance of the tender from Urban Link Civil Limited. Tatham notes that they've administered 3 contracts with this company in the last 5 years and that they have the ability and experience to complete the scope of work included for our project. In accordance with the tender document, the contract shall commence next week, and that part 1 be substantially completed by November 15th, 2023, and part 2 by November 15th, 2024. While it's unlikely that construction will be starting next week, there's a long procurement time to getting the necessary materials for this project. Tatham has also noted that based on what's being experienced in the construction world is that any work not completed, or if this is delayed, that it will just increase the price accordingly for this project. Again, the financial implications part. The total construction estimate for the 2-year project utilized for budget purposes was $2,588,700, and that included the contingency allowance. As noted, the full scope exceeds the budget projection by $292,393.63. The reduced tender scope is slightly under the budget projection, just by about $3,653.72. Staff's recommendation, as you will see in the recommendation piece, is to award the project based on option 1, the full tender scope, given any reduced or removed work will eventually need to be completed and prices are expected to continue to increase. This will reduce the need for additional investment over the life cycle of Bridge 3 specifically. However, option 2 is provided should council be more comfortable with this option's financials as detailed, and should this be council's direction, a recommendation amendment would be required. Award of this project is needed to ensure there's no further financial implications for procurement of materials. As has been detailed in the financial implications, regardless of which option is accepted, the impact on property taxes in 2024 needs to be considered. It may be beneficial to consider other alternatives, such as internal borrowing from general reserves, to control that tax implications piece and to allow for implementation of other capital projects. It's noted that in 2025, we will see our P&H Center loan be completed, and therefore there is that opportunity to continue with those types of payments towards towards a bridge loan, if that's in fact the direction that is taken. So in the financial implications section, option 1, full tender scope, you see that the difference is that $292,393.63 based on construction. That added to what is proposed in 2024. Again, this is a project that carries over multiple years. It's not just a 2023, it's also a 2024 project. So basically what we're suggesting in this, again, this scenario is that Once the project is complete, we would internally borrow for the difference that's required for 2023. Once the project is complete, we would then look to reduce that tax amount contribution to approximately 25% or $221,200, with the remainder for internal borrowing to support that project. That internal borrowing, if we stick with the $170,000 as those payments moving forward, would be that would see us be completed over 6.4 years. In option 2, which is the reduced tender scope, again, a similar scenario where we would borrow internally to cover the added amount needed for 2023. And then when the project is completed in 2024, we would reduce that amount by about 25% to be $180,051. And then we would internally borrow for that $540,155. And again, sticking with the $170,000 payment, the repayment would be over 4.5 years. So the difference between existing scope and revised scope is about 1.9 years additional to repay the amount accordingly. Chris assisted with these financial numbers, so she can assist if there's any further clarification. I've tried to make it as simple as I can in my verbal, given that you've got the written in front of you. And I'll maybe just ask Chris if she's got anything to add at this point in regards to that specifically. Is there any other comments that you would add, Chris, at that time? No? Okay.
I don't see anything at this time. It's just we wanted to bring to your attention in 2024, the way it was presented in 2023. There was an amount of $871,000 required from taxes. And if that's the direction council goes, that could be the only project that you get done in capital. So we are suggesting that we look at this at a long point, that you don't want to be using a whole $871,000 of all your tax dollars in 2024. And this is our direction should you move forward with that. And the impact would be no tax dollar increase once the $170,000 on the P&H Center is done. August 2025, September 2025, you start with the new one and you have a 6.4 years to continue with that, which is a pretty good way to use the tax dollars without adding additional tax dollars to that and allowing you to have more capital in 2024.
Just to wrap up in summary, when completed, the total project cost for the trail bridges, looking at from start to finish, so along with our background work that we've had to complete over the last couple of years, is $3,024,864.74 based on the full tender scope. We have received and been approved for ISIP, which is the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Grant Program of $1,577,768.28. The reserves, the $250,000, again, that was approved in 2019, and we've been using that to date, including some dollars allocated from those funds that were approved in 2019 in 2023, with the town then contribution between taxes and or internal borrowing being about $1,197,095.74. The grant funding is very clear that we're not able to double dip. So we're not able to apply to further grant funding to, especially provincial grant funding, to help support what may be additional costs. So again, the recommendation that staff have put before you is that report CAO-05-23 Trail Bridges tender be received, that the project be awarded to Urban Link Civil Limited for a total cost of $2,725,500 plus HST as per the tender's original scope, and that the mayor and CAO be authorized to enter into a contract with Urban Link Civil Limited for the trail bridges replacement and rehabilitation. If there's any questions or clarifications, I'd be happy to answer those.
So Sherry, the $3 million total project, that's to replace 3 bridges and refurbish 1.
Correct. Correct. So that's replacement of bridges 1, 2, and 4 and refurbishment of bridge 3.
Thank you. Councillor Hawking.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for the report, Sherry. This question is to Chris. In 2024, The tax is 871,200, and there's nothing in reserves. Could we take the $324,000 we just saved on the road project and throw that money into the reserves?
Through your worship, that full 324,000 is not just tax dollars. That would be water and sewer, so it's all done accordingly. So I think there would be about 180,000. There's a possibility in 2022, if we don't need to borrow internally from reserves and we have enough tax dollars, I would come back to council and ask if, just like I did for the OLG monies towards the theater, saying that we have this extra funds from tax dollars not being allocated for capital. Can we use it towards this bridge? That would mean less that we have to borrow in the future, making that 6.4 years down to probably 4 or 5 years.
So that's a possibility.
It's a possibility, but it's not the full 324. If you look at Ron's report, it's all broken down by water, sewer, storm, sanitary, or roads, curb, storm, and everything else he has. So those are different areas where the money comes from.
But it would help lower the.
Yeah, I think that when I did the math real quick on his, I think it was about 183,000 in tax dollars that we could be putting towards this trail bridge in 2023. So that 292 would be down 180 some thousand. Assuming nothing else major comes up and council doesn't want to use it for something else.
We're going to think positive that every tender is going to come in under, except this one. Yeah, well, you know, if I could just make a comment, I think we knew that when we got the government grants that, you know, I think Brian Teixeira indicated that, you know, inflationary pressures that we probably would be faced with increases. But, you know, having said that and how important it is to our community, I think this is an excellent presentation and a proposal, and Chris has got her magic numbers going there. So I just want to say thanks for the report, and I endorse it.
Okay, Ron, they keep taking your money on you. Deputy Mayor Dickert.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the concerns I have is when we talk about these projects, we talk about them in isolation, and, you know, we forget about all the other projects we have going, like a fire hall and continuing to pay for the theater renovations that we just completed. And sometimes you kind of lose track of where you're at, and, you know, going over budget, we don't know what the fire hall is going to come in at, but we've seen here what's happened with these bridges. And I think it would only be prudent to expect the same thing's going to happen on our fire hall project. So I guess my question, one of them is, for Bridge 3, if we didn't do the refurbishment this year, what is the life expectancy of that bridge before we need to do something in some way, shape, or form? And the other question or comment was about the approaches, the railings coming up to the bridge. You know, we have 7 bridges. None of the other bridges have that. It's a nice to have, but I think, you know, we've heard it clear from our residents. They want these trails open as soon as possible, and perhaps deferring Bridge 3 rehabilitation would get them open even a little bit sooner. So those are 2 points I'd like to hear from Sherry on.
So Bridge 3, again, the only part that is not being done as part of the original scope is, as noted, sorry, I just need to go back to is the timber deck replacement. The new timber, like the new surface, the curbs and railings are being done. This is really that deck piece that is not being done. I don't have how long before that needs to be done date by any means, but again, when they're doing some of this work now, like they are doing some curbs and the bridge deck, it would make sense that we are probably doing that at the same time, as opposed to having to tear that up at some point in time to deal with the deck replacement. And the approaches would be, again, yes, you're correct. We don't have them currently. I believe it's an added safety element that is just, again, that railing part that as you're approaching the bridges, that should you get off the bridge, that it's that kind of that protective thing that you don't get down any further. It's, you know, so that your railings don't just start as soon as you're on the bridge area. That's kind of extended a little bit further. That's the approach railing as such. As for completion sooner, I don't think the reduced scope versus extended scope changes that timing piece a little bit. And in fact, some of the initial information I've had from the engineering firm is that we have some opportunity to be done in a timely timeframe compared to the November 2024 end date. So I don't wish to give a date because you don't know exactly what may happen, but they are encouraged that that time frame is certainly achievable, if not can be sooner.
Yeah, and one other question, on page 120 of the package from the consultants report, that they're suggesting we accept the reduced project.
And that,
And I didn't see any place else in that report where they were recommending that we take option one. So why are we going against what the consultants are telling us?
that's a fair question, through you, your worship. So their initial letter was to accept the tender as presented at the full scope, to which, as I said, I went back to them as a staff member and from a due diligence perspective said, we need to consider what a reduced scope might look like to be within our budget. And this is their second letter accordingly, to reflect that request of staff to provide a reduced scope that's within our allocated budget request.
So they didn't change their position. This is just a separate letter.
Correct.
Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question for Chris. Do we have a money tree in our parking lot? I look at fire hall. It's not going to come in at 6 million. I'll be surprised if it does. We got a water tower. You know, we've got some big items. I agree with Deputy Mayor Dickert on the horizon, and it's you know, it's a lot of money to be spent. I know our residents are getting very impatient that our bridges aren't open or our trails aren't open, but you know, we're spending a lot of money.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Do I need to answer that?
Oh.
We technically spend about just under $400,000 a year on repayment of internal loans and external loans. The fire hall will definitely be an external loan when we go forward. And all the internal loans are basically our reserves. So we get back the interest and stuff on our own. So we get to keep that interest and not give it to another second company. Whereas the P&H loan, we're with another bank. They get the interest every month that we pay on that 170. We're going to be able to bring back part of that money. So about 30,000 of that comes back into the coffers. By internally borrowing, we're not showing it on our FIR that it's an actual loan. We have over 3.5 to 3.8 million that you can actually repay back according to the FIR on all our loans. We don't ever want to get to that point. We are very low on what we're paying on loans. We're actually one of the few that can actually borrow internally because we have the capacity to do that. Whereas everybody is going out and getting construction loans. They're getting other loans and stuff. We just floated over 390,000 for SMART for their ICIP transit over the last 2 years. And we just got the money the other day. So we have the capacity to do that because we are diligent in putting monies aside to cover these rainy days. And we're able to come in with good tenders and we make sure that we're budgeting properly the way we need to be. So no, we don't have a money tree in the parking lot. We're just being very diligent in how we're making the work and being very creative in how we're working on this. And I know council doesn't want to have any more tax dollars. So our solution to this was you borrow internally, wait until 2024 when the whole project is done. By 2025, when you borrow in 1 year, it's the following year when you pay for it. It does not matter when you start the loan in 2025. That's why we said that 170 will continue. So we'll spend about 8 months worth on the P&H Center, have that done, and the balance of the 4 months will start September, and then it'll go for the 6 years at that point. There's no additional cost to the taxpayer because that 170 has already been in the budget for years. That's why we're suggesting that.
Thank you, Chris, and I really do appreciate the great job you do. The money tree was just, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Hawking.
Just on Councillor Fleet, this town has built a value, sort of a ingrained attitude to be progressive. And if we didn't go ahead and, plan for the future, the aquatic center, the partnership in the medical clinic, the civic center, the P&H center, the Heritage Square, this is just part of us moving forward and providing the necessary programs for our citizens down the road. So I wouldn't be too critical that we're putting adverse pressures on our finances. And in fact, I think we're just doing the opposite. We're showing that we are meeting the needs of our clients, our taxpayers by planning and doing our due diligence. And we got the fire hall coming. We also have a police station in 2026. But I told you this before, when I was in council in the 80s, we got told by the ministry, no more. You guys are so far in debt, we can't afford to do anything. And the council that day started and began the principles of putting things in reserves. And Chris has just made note of it, the positive impact that has on our finances going forward. So I don't like sort of the connotation that, we gotta be, I shouldn't say this, but it's a bit of fear mongering that, we're going to be in a bad financial situation. I don't believe that at all. So that's just my little comment on this whole thing moving forward.
Thank you. Councillor Sackel, then Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, Sherry, for the report. I don't know about you, but I didn't know much about approach railings, so I Googled it. I was researching this afternoon and checking out all kinds of things about bridges, and I'm imagining myself, most of the approach railings deal with roadways, of course, and traffic, and I almost got hit just as I was coming into in the town of Hanover from Walkerton after work once, when if that railing hadn't have been there, I would have been in deep trouble. So I imagine myself on the trail, and I like to bike the trail. And I'm thinking, if we should go with the reduced scope, we would get rid of those approach railings. And I thought, well, if I'm on my bike and a dog and a person are walking toward me and I get spooked, I might just go off the trail. So I thought, no, I need an approach railing. I think that's important. And then I got thinking, well, if we don't do Bridge 3, then there's going to be so many residents upset because the trail's going to have to close again. And then I hear Chris talk about numbers and I think, yes, I want to go with full scope. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Sherry, for the report. I think it's great that we're at this stage finally, and we know that residents are very excited for the bridges to reopen. Just wondering, could you explain a little bit about how the contingency works? There was a note in the engineer's report about that the approach railings could be completed under the contingency allowance if there's sufficient remaining budget at completion. So how does that allocation work? And if the project ultimately is under budget, then are those funds that are not spent?
Yeah, so again, contingency fund is the unexpected. So they get into a bridge repair and they get into something that, or replacement, I should say, replacement. They get into it and there's something in that substructure that they weren't counting on. So it's that surprise or that unexpected. It would mean a change order at that point in time. And rather than have to come back to council for that, $10,000 item, let's say, as a change order, then we've got that contingency piece through the change order process that would come from that allocation. And yes, if the contingency fund does not get used, then you would be under the total amount based on that. So let's say you didn't use $100,000 of the contingency fund, then that total price would be adjusted down by $100,000. And hence why, again, the engineering firm was suggesting that an alternative in the reduced scope could be that if we find that the contingency fund hasn't needed to be used as much, it hasn't needed to be used, and the budget allocation allowed for those approach railings, then it could be completed in that manner.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments? All right, so before us is option 1. And it's been moved by Councillor Hudson, seconded by Councillor Cable. I'll call the question. All in favor? And those opposed? Can a mover oppose it? Okay, good. Look at stuff you learn. So opposed by Deputy Mayor Dickert and opposed by Councillor Hudson. The rest of council has approved it. That is carried. Thank you. Okay, item 10 is committees of council minutes. So we have minutes from item 10.1 through to 10.5 and one motion to cover this. So I need a mover and seconder before we highlight all these minutes. So I have the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Fleet. So the first one is the Age Friendly Advisory Committee minutes. Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Age Friendly Advisory Committee met Monday, February 13th. I'll just go over some of the highlights. I left everybody a letter from Sharon Coulter, a committee member. Were provided a copy of Sharon's letter that was sent to MPP Owen Sound Grey Bruce Alex Ruppman, MP Owen Sound Grey Bruce. It's quite an interesting letter, so I hope everybody has a chance to read it. We elected a new chairperson. Pamela Matheson was appointed the position as chairperson, and Loretta Dunn volunteered to take on the position as vice chair. Items for direction. We've got the senior expo coming up this Tuesday, and I thank all counselors and for volunteering their time for the seniors expo. We've got trade show participants, bags from the DIA. There'll be food and beverage, and L. Crawford will be entertaining. And then we had committee sign up table set up. So people have registered for working the table, food and beverage, registration. So anyways, things are coming along with that. And we discussed Bill 23, and that's all I've got to report.
Thank you. Folks, if there's any questions or comments, just let me know. We have item 10.2.1. This is the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee minutes. Councillor Hudson.
So the Parks, Recreation and Culture took place on Wednesday, February the 22nd. And some of the highlights are a new pool scoreboard, which is in cooperation with the Hanover Swim Club. And it's been purchased and will be installed on the east wall of the pool. The 2023 Senior 55 Plus Games planning has begun, and the games are set to begin in early April. Schedule registration information will be made available, probably is out there now. Special Olympic swim team is hosting a mini meet on Wednesday of this week. And the pre-registration that's been in effect for Aquafit and the senior adult and adult swims is proposed to end with a phased-in approach beginning now as well. We also went over the master plan review, and the staff were drafting top priorities for 2023 to work on. And then capital projects approved, was discussed with playground improvements, the trail system bridges, P&H Center boiler, ice resurfacer, and the P&H Center security camera enhancement project as well. And that is all for that.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Item 10.2.1.1 is the disc golf course development ad hoc committee minutes. Councillor Cable.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. The Disc Golf Course Development Ad Hoc Committee met on February the 7th. We're very excited because we're nearing the implementation phase of a year and a bit of planning for disc golf course, which will be installed at the Hanover Park, hopefully this spring. So you will notice that as part of the meeting, we discussed the need to secure sponsorship before purchasing of the disc golf baskets. And so the committee agreed that we would secure a minimum of 7 of 9 hole sponsors before purchasing the equipment. So as of our meeting last week, we're at 6 of 9. So we are getting very close. So we are hopeful that perhaps by our next meeting, we will be at 9 out of 9. We'll have to see. We discussed the fundraising package again, which was finalized and has been sent out. And then, of course, we talked about sponsorship prospects. Finally, we discussed disc golf rules and made some final revisions on those. And we've also been investigating the UDisc app, which is going to be a great way. It's a no-cost app that we'll be able to put the Hanover course on, so it will help for promotional purposes, and also we'll be able to track users for the course. So anyone that scans the QR code that will be on our signage, it will track how many people have been at the Hanover disc golf course. So we're very excited, and things are moving along well.
Sounds good. Okay, item 10.2.2. This is the, again, the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee minutes. Councillor Hudson.
So we did have a special meeting going over the results of the Center of Excellence Park and Splash Pad feasibility study with the Plural group. And a lot of questions came up and a lot of great discussion with that. So the number of people that actually answered the survey was 562, which everyone thought was a good amount. So that was great. A lot of things that came out from it. The interest with the things that people wanted and didn't want. So specifically, high numbers in washrooms being accessible, vibrant and variety of water features, and particularly shade and good viewing and seating options. So that may be the grandparents checking that box, not sure. Anyway, so we had a good discussion with the group, and they went over the different site selections and the sort of the pros and cons per se of each different area that we had. So they went through each and every one of them, starting with the Heritage Square, different opportunities for each section and different challenges for each one as well. So they spent quite a bit of time going through all of those and discussing, again, washrooms, the maintenance, circuitry, electronic thing that they would need to have. And also a staff person would need to be checking it daily to make sure that everything was okay, and with the water supply as well. They also discussed the difference between the recirculation system and the flow through system of water as well. And, different costs of those sort of things. Chemicals would be involved, of course, with the recirculation system. So again, different expenses and that as well.
I have a question.
Mhm.
What's the next steps then?
Well, we actually have this come up at our meeting, which is on Wednesday. So I thought maybe they would be presenting this, but we have a PRC meeting on Wednesday, and I'm sure this is on the agenda. So I'm sure that that's going to entail what the next steps will be, and location and costing and all of those details.
Very good. Thank you. All right, we'll move on. Item 10.3 is the Economic Tourism and Culture Development Committee minutes. Councillor Sackle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Chair Dave Eccles stated that regrettably Tony Diaco has resigned from this committee. So Jen Olivero has joined it to represent the DIA. We talked about the Cultural Roundtable Event Development Fund. There's been some adjustments to that. And myself and Jason Ron have volunteered to sit on that subcommittee to help judge future applications to that fund. The Heritage Committee gave a bit of an update. They met on the 19th of January. They're working on identifying historical buildings to present 100-year plaques. And we found out that the Forum would have been 100 years old. So that was sad to hear. He went over, the member composition updates. Saugeen Connects hosted a very successful International Women's Day event in coordination with WOWSA. I was happy to be there along with Councillor Hudson and Mayor Sue Patterson. And I thought it was very well organized and very worthwhile evening. HIP apprentice Christine Sampson spoke about what's been going on. She's been working with the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program and Support Ontario Youth. And they're going to have a 2-week skilled trade boot camp in Hanover. So that should be exciting for graduating students. And Launchpad for Canadian Welding Bureau. She's been working with that and trying to build that program up as well, and enhancing certifications. And the DIA, Jennifer talked about some of the things that are happening. They did a Shamrock Hunt selfie promo for St. Paddy's Day, and there's an Easter word scramble coming up, and the Springtime Shop and Win is imminent. The Saugeen Municipal Airport apprised us of events that are going on. I know that for us, the Councillor Tour and Flight is coming up. That was mentioned last month at our meeting. And I know that Jason Radstake is having a Maple Leaf Foods tour on March the 28th for our committee. Thank you.
Very good. And if you would like to continue with item 10.3.1, the Cultural Roundtable Committee minutes.
I'll do my best. Thank you, Your Worship. That meeting took place on March the 1st, and they're looking at doing a cultural facility tour update. So they're waiting to hear from Georgian Bay Center of Arts, and I believe they're going to do it along with Southampton Arts. So that'll be a great idea. I know we wanted to do that a couple of years ago, but the pandemic changed that. They talked about a joint spring information and networking session event coming up. And she shared some details about a session with Wellington North and Minto Cultural Roundtables. So that's a great opportunity to work together to see what other cultural roundtable groups are doing. There was a comment about shared information on Grey Roots funding worth $10,000. It's available for artists and not for profits, but it's not available for municipalities, just so you know. Councillor Cable has done a great job of arranging dates for Music in the Square, so we thank him for that. And there was an update on recent posts that include the Home and Garden Show and the Hanover Community Players. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hudson.
Thank you. I just want to clarify under the, sorry, which one is it? The Tourism and Culture Committee, the Spring Awards at the Hanover Legion. Can you just, for some reason, I'm thinking.
So I'm not. You're talking about Cultural Roundtable?
Economic Tourism and Culture Development Committee, the minutes,
Yes.
page 131.
130.
At the very bottom. The Spring Awards at the Hanover Legion on April 18th,
right?
Is
What's
that
your question?
I'm just wondering if that's the correct date. For some reason, I was thinking we had something on the 28th. 18th?
I'm just checking. I have 6 to 7 at the Legion on the 18th.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so All right, moving on, item 10.4 is the Hanover Walkerton Waste Management Committee minutes. Deputy Mayor Dicker.
Thank you, Your Worship. February 10th was that meeting, and it was the first meeting of that committee for this term of council. So we did discuss the terms of reference, the committee composition, and the principal duties of sitting on that committee. We also had the chance to review what GM Blue Plan, who has been awarded the contract for the Bruce County Waste Management Master Plan. So they're starting to look at everything across Bruce County. So we're hoping that they'll have some good ideas and regards to what they do with organics and all those good things, that we can kind of take that information and take advantage of it for our own purposes. The committee approved the 2023 budget. As far as statistics for the landfill site, curbside pickup for Hanover was down 2.93%, over the scale was up 16%. Curbside pickup in Walkerton was up 1.49%, over the scale was down 8%. Overall mixed recyclables was down 11%. And this is over for the entire year, just to be clear. Cardboard was down 18%. And overall site receivables for 2022 was 10.7% above what 2021 had. So still using up lots of landfill space. We reviewed the September to December operations report, and there was no concerns noted in that report. That is my report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment. I was really pleased to read that the committee has agreed that organics waste collection is a priority. So I think this is an amazing step forward and something that we really need. I think there's no point in organics going and filling up valuable space in our landfill. So I'm really glad to see that the committee is looking into that and making progress in 2023.
Yes. Okay, Councillor Fleet, did you have your hand up? Sorry. Oh, sorry. I just saw something from the side of my my peripheral vision. All right, 10.5.1 Planning Advisory Committee minutes. Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Worship. Plan Advisory Committee met February 14th. Our clerk, Vicky McDonald, delivered an informative and comprehensive presentation in relation to committee meeting procedures. And then Grey County Housing Strategy Summary. Secretary Treasurer stated the Grey County has commenced a housing strategy initiative and invited all municipalities to participate in the strategy meetings to assist in addressing housing shortage and impacts directly related to Bill 23. That's that said minutes. Do you want me to go into March 14th? Planning Advisory met on March 14th. I'll just go over some of the highlights here. There's minor variance application number A1-23 for Richard and Lee Mashad. The owner proposed to expand existing legal non-confronting resident use to construction addition to existing two-story dwelling for additional dwelling. The owner is seeking to vary provisions comprise zoning bylaw 2912-15 for maximized gross building area for necessary building in the downtown commercial C1 zone to conduct a future 40 by 40 accessory building for a shop, an additional dwelling unit. This unit's going to be used for his own personal use. This would be the Ivan Grimes home that is beside community living. Number 8, minor variance application number A2-23, Brandon Shelby Hopkins. The owner proposes to construct a 300-foot covered deck addition to the existing legal non-confronting residence using the corridor commercials C2 zone located at 483 9th Street. And then we had a staff report, PB-08- municipal development charges that was discussed, and 10.1 County of Grey report, PDR-CW-1023 natural heritage review options. And I take any questions.
Thank you. And I don't see any questions. So that was the last set of minutes to be reviewed and highlighted. So we have one motion for those sets of minutes. The items are 10.1 through to 10.5. It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Dickert, seconded by Councillor Fleet. And the motion is to receive the information and approve the recommendations contained in those minutes. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So item 11 is bylaws. We have 3 bylaws and I need a mover and seconder before I ask the clerk for the intent of the bylaws. Councillor Cable and Councillor Sacco. So go ahead, Vicky.
Bylaw 3257-23 is a bylaw to authorize the town of Hanover to collect the dedicated gas tax funds from the Ministry of Transportation. Bylaw 3258-23 is a bylaw of the town of Hanover to confirm the proceedings of the council of the corporation of the town of Hanover at its regular meeting held on February 21st, 2023. And bylaw 3259-23 is a bylaw of the corporation of the town of Hanover to amend bylaw 3134-20 as amended, being a bylaw to adopt a community improvement plan for the community improvement project area of the town of Hanover.
Thank you, Vicky. So it's been moved by Councillor Cable, seconded by Councillor Sacco, that bylaw numbers 3257-23 through to 3258-23 be introduced and that they be taken as read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation and inserted in the bylaw book. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question about some page 149, bylaw 3259-23 about the community improvement plan update. Just wondering, and perhaps this is something that doesn't need to be addressed, but it specifically states in here that the authority will go to the plan administrator, which is nice because that's vague, the CAO, which we know we'll always have, and then it specifically lists manager of building services / CBO. And is that a position that we'll always have, or are we better to just say plan administrator, CAO, and CBO? So that if that job were to change in the future, we wouldn't have to update this again.
Sherry?
Through your worship, yeah, that's an option. And I think that would be a good alternative because yes, you're right. CBO is something that we will always have.
I'll ask the clerk now what?
So what we will do with this one is we will just amend this to be CBO. I don't think it's necessary to have an amending motion for that purpose.
Thank you for that. So again, I will ask if there's any further questions, comments. Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Item 12 is correspondence requiring action. We do not have any. Item 13 is reports and correspondence for information. 13.1 is the Hanover Downtown Improvement Area meeting minutes. Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Worship. DIA met January 12th. I'll just go over some of the highlights. The Small Business Security Enhancement Grant update. Krista noted to date 5 businesses have applied and businesses are urged to send their application in. Promotion will continue on this grant partnership with the DIA Town and Chamber. There's been no recent applications. Budget 2023 detailed final review by the board, actual costs confirmed and inducted in the proposed 2023 budget with hard copies at the meeting. And other business, springtime shop and spin win 2023 third annual. It goes from April 3rd to the 21st over Easter. That's all I have to report from DIA.
Very good. Thank you. All right, moving on. Item 14 is councillor and staff updates. And we'll start with Councillor Sacco.
Thank you, Your Worship. On Friday, March the 3rd, I attended my very first Community Safety and Wellbeing and Planning Advisory Committee meeting. On Tuesday, March the 7th, I attended a Launchpad Board of Directors meeting. Wednesday, March the 8th, I attended the Wowza dinner and panelist discussion. Thursday, March the 9th, I volunteered with the March for Meals program associated with the Home and Community Support Services of Grey Bruce, delivering meals with B and Roy Mitchell of Hanover. On Friday, March the 10th, there was a Launchpad Board of Directors meeting. Tuesday, March the 14th, I attended Zoom meeting, watching the Planning Advisory meeting. And on Wednesday, March the 15th, I attended the Economic Development and Culture meeting held at the Saugeen Airport.
Thank you. Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was pleased to attend the Launchpad board meeting on February 27th as the alternate for Councillor Sackle. And I think that the report earlier this evening was a good step forward from the discussions that we had that evening. On March the 10th, I worked the door at the Hanover Barons game, and it was great to see turnout and community spirit as the Barons that took on the Capitals. That was in game number 1, and certainly congratulations to the Barons on their win, multiple wins during the past week. On March the 13th, I attended virtually the Hanover Chamber AGM with Her Worship, who brought an excellent update about things that are happening in Hanover. On March the 15th, the Hanover Bentic and Brant Agricultural Society met, and I'm very pleased to say that the board has approved its strategic plan for 2023 to 2027. And this document will be available shortly on their website, and I believe a press release will be forthcoming. Following the approval of the strategic plan, a hall building committee was struck, and I am pleased to be part of that new group. We do have an update on Music in the Square. So Music in the Square will start in June, June the 11th. So we're doing the 2nd and 4th Sunday of every month from 2 to 4 p.m. And so we'll have Marianne and Carl Holst starting us off on June the 11th, Al Crawford on June the 25th, Lisa McEwen on July the 9th, Assorted Affair, July 23rd, James Scarnacat on August the 13th, and Tandem, which will be closing us on August the 27th. So we're hoping for a lot of sun and good weather this summer. I think other than that, the only other thing I would highlight is that the Rotary Club is presenting their Easter egg Easter activities in Heritage Square. And I believe that that is on Saturday, April the 8th from 11 to 12.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Your Worship. On February 28th, I attended the job fair, and it was very well put together, very busy. For the whole 4 hours, the parking lot was full, so kudos to everyone there. On Saturday, March the 4th, I attended the craft show that they had at the Legion, and again, it was a full house, lots of people in and out of there, so that was good to see that sort of thing happening again in our town. On Wednesday, March the 8th, I attended also with Councillor Sackle and Mayor Sue Patterson, the Wowza event. It was very well attended. The guest speaker was great, and the panelists were varied, and they were very informative. On March the 14th, I also virtually attended the Planning Advisory Committee. March the 15th, we had our library board meeting and planning some of the different activities that we're going to have coming up. And then just as a side note, this Saturday, March the 25th, there will be some counselors taking part in the year-end bonspiel at the curling club. So if you really need a really good laugh, come on out, have a beverage and watch the show.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hawking.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of items to mention. On March the 7th, I attended my first virtual Zoom meeting of the Ontario Association Police Services Board Zone 5 meeting. Found it very, very informative. And the following day, I met with Luigi Presta from Think Compass and Steve Furness, the manager of the Economic Development and Tourism, Grey County, Murray McDonald, and we are looking at new ventures for the Saugeen Municipal Airport. So, and also April was there too. She actually set up the meeting. So thanks, April. And then Counselor Brandon Cable mentioned July the 23rd for assorted affairs for Music in the Square. I want you to circle that date because we also is the second annual Plein Air Art Festival being held from July the 21st to the 25th. So if you're interested in becoming a volunteer, I don't know Laura's email, but you could give me a call and I'll certainly forward your name to the committee. I plan to volunteer again this year. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Worship. February 28th, I attended the regional job fair along with Deputy Mayor Dickert. Lots of employers looking for help, great job opportunities. I've been attending the Hanover Barons first round playoffs against Walkerton. Barons won the series. Now move on to face Mitchell. There's been great crowds at the game, so come on out and support our hometown team. Good luck to the Barons. I've been attending all my committee meetings. Mark March 28th on your calendar, the Active Aging Expo from 12:30 to 4 at the Lions Den. And they're looking for volunteers. So if anybody like to volunteer, contact Brandon Dobson at Parks and Recreation. That's all I've got to report.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Dickert.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship. My activities over the last month, February 22nd and 24th, attended Saugeen Mobility meetings. February 28th, the JDS job fair, and it's as mentioned earlier, it was really nice to talk to the employers and listen to them and some of the challenges they have, but not only that, some of the accolades they have for doing business in our town, because there was lots of that as well. So I think we've done a good job of creating that environment for them, and they are appreciative of it. Had a physician recruitment meeting March 2nd, and on March 16th, I attended the Enbridge open house regarding servicing of natural gas to the Newstead area. That project does actually involve some work within our town limits here, and it was just interesting to listen to them and find out what their plans are going forward. I think that project won't start until next year, but as I said, it does tie into the system that serves Hanover, and we'll have some activity in our town as well. And that's my report. I also attended county council and the related committee meetings there as well. So thank you.
Thank you. So I attended the OLG staff chili contest. I was one of the judges, and I did bring a taste tester along because I'm not a spicy, I don't like a lot of spice, put it that way. April was my taste tester. So Chief Noel was there, and the president and owner of Hallman Motors, Sean Turner, was there, the Match restaurant chef, and Carol Wallace was there representing the MS Society. So it was fun, and we had a good time, staff had a good time, and Spicy Sisters won the contest. So they were quite excited. I also attended the Rotary Club as a guest speaker, and Sherry came with me, our CAO, to help with the hard questions, because you know a little bit about everything, but not all the finer details. So thanks for attending, Sherry. That was a good presentation, and they enjoyed it. I also attended the police zone meeting that Councillor Hawking attended. Bail reform was a informative topic. I attended a session on essentials of municipal fire protection to stay up to date on that. And of course, the International Women's Day, which was mentioned already, and April was the MC. She did a very good job. And the Chamber AGM, and again, Enbridge Gas Open House. And yes, I was told spring of 2024, they will start that project, and people in Newstead will have gas. So they're quite excited, as I would be too, because you never expect it's going to come to the smaller villages. So that's my update. And now I'll ask staff if there's anything. And I don't see any, so okay. All right, so we'll move on. Item 15 is planning and other meetings. That is a list of all our meetings and board meetings, and that's on this agenda and also on our website. So dates to remember and announcements. The next committee of the whole meeting is April 3rd at 4 p.m. The next regular council meeting is April 17th at 4 p.m. And the municipal office will be closed on Good Friday, which is April 7th, and Easter Monday, which is April 10th. And at this time, I'll ask if there's any notices of motion. Seeing none, we do not have a closed meeting. I need a mover and seconder to adjourn at 7:30. Councillor Hawking and Councillor Hudson, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone.